Welcome to final part. Sirius entered Grimewald Place the same time Alastair came through the flue. They both looked at each other across the kitchen and sighed. Fudge and Umbridge, Sirius said, sitting at the table and grabbing a teacup that just appeared. Thanks, Dinky, he called out. There was a welcome, Master, then a snap and they were alone again. Albus and Snape, Moody grunted as he too sat, but he pulled his flask, and took a deep draw from it. Do you think yours went better than mine? Black asked, pouring himself some tea. Nope, I'm sure it was about the same, the other man grumbled. Damn, the younger man cursed. So, neither one of us got what we wanted, he guessed. He knew that the two he threatened today would ignore him until he did what he said he would. They were politicians after all, he was sure they got threatened on a daily basis. Still, he was a black, so that might make a difference. You're probably right, I know at least Albus will ignore half of what I said. Not sure about Snape though, the older man said, rubbing his chin. Did you tell him we were hunting the Horcruxes? Albus, I mean, Sirius asked, sipping his still hot tea. I did. Though I didn't say what or where, Alastair said, slumping down in his chair a bit. Arguing with Albus always took a lot out of him. That and he wasn't getting any younger. Just to recap, Sirius said, putting his empty cup on the table, and watching it refill while he talked, we have a ring, a necklace, Harry, the diary is gone. And the goblins are taking care of whatever is in the bank. That's 5, we know that there are 3 more, including Riddle, and one's at Hogwarts. Do you think we should inform Albus? Nah, if I thought that, I'd have told him while I was there. I did some looking around, but without Bill's spell, I couldn't find anything. That and I didn't want to stay too long, the old man would have gotten suspicious, Alastair said, giving an irritated huff. Probably for the best. I didn't tell Umbridge to stay away from Hogwarts. Just to leave me and mine alone. I'm pretty sure that she's going to ignore that, like I said, just to try and push me. With Tonks taking Harry's place, I'm hoping she'll do something stupid and wind up in my old cell, Sirius confessed with a malicious grin. Like you said, probably for the best. I'll have to grill Tonks on a few things, Moody said, rubbing his stubbly chin. We're going to have her watch Snape too, right? Are we looking for blackmail, or expulsion? Me, I'd like to never see that bastard again, preferably laying in a ditch somewhere, but that's a pipe dream, so let's go with expulsion, Sirius said. Thinking hard on what Tonks could use to get this done. She had the man for potions years ago, so what could she use now, that she couldn't use then? Why are you so hung up on Snape? I thought it was you that did him wrong all those years agone, Moody said, his brow furrowed. Oh, I did, I'll never deny that I sent him to face a werewolf. But, let me ask you this, if I told you that if you wanted to see a werewolf, and where they were hidden, would you be stupid enough to go there? I surely thought old Snivellis was smarter than to try and face Moony on the night of the full moon. Yet, even though he was stupid enough to do that, I was accused of attempted murder. I'd bet it is one of the reasons everyone believed I betrayed James and Lily. So, no, I have no sympathy for that man, Sirius said, his voice filled with anger and hate. But you got a slap on the hand, if I heard correctly, was the rebuttal. It was still put on my school record as a prank gone bad. That and Albus doesn't let a moment go by that he doesn't remind me that I could have gone to Azkaban earlier, had he not intervened, the other man said, a snarl on his face. Yes, Albus is prone to do that, agreed Alastair. Anyway, I'll have Tonks ask Amelia what to look for with Snape. Do you think she can handle all of this? Sirius asked, getting away from the sore subject. Yeah, I trained her myself. Besides, I'm going to rely on the twins to get the Horcrux. According to them, and the other kids, they know the castle better than anyone, the old Auror stated, his eyes gleaming with something. I'll tell her to keep watch on the teachers. Snape especially. Did you let McGonagall know about Tonks? He asked. He didn't want to talk about Snape anymore. He really did hate that guy, and not just because of childhood rivalries, but the man's treatment of his new baby brother, along with all the other people he knew that had that man as a professor. If you could even call him that. Yeah, she didn't like it at first, until I told her some things about what the Order is and is not doing. She got in a right strop, and decided to help us out, Alastair said, taking another swig of his hip flask. He'd let it go. There was no need for him to get involved with those two men. How much did you tell her? Only that Tonks was going to be posing as Harry, and that she was going to keep an eye on the new Dada professor, was the casual answer. No, I mean about the Order, Sirius clarified. I know what you meant, I just chose not to answer you. There are some things that I know that would make you more mad at Albus than you are already. You would put the whole operation in danger if you go storming off to mete out punishment, the older man practically snarled. Fine, I get that, but when this is all over, I want to know, the dogman grumbled. We'll see, was the non-committal answer. Just then the kids and Tonks came home, making a lot of noise. How was the movie? Sirius asked, letting them all sit down. That was the wickedest thing I've ever seen, George said, Fred nodding along as they dazedly came into the room and just sat down stunned. How did they do that? Ron asked, his eyes still wide with awe at what he had seen. He had been asking since they left. Hermione had tried to explain it, but they were surrounded by people, so she told him that she'd tell him later. Please, don't answer that, Hermione, Harry begged, knowing it would be a long discussion. I won't, not yet anyway, she agreed. She would take the Weasleys aside later and tell them what she knew about movie making. They all settled down and the kids told Sirius about their afternoon. The Weasleys waxed poetic on the movie they saw. Which was The Mask. They went on and on about how it must be magic and would not be told otherwise. To them there was no other explanation. Harry was kinda regretting that they didn't watch The Lion King. But then again, they might think that was made with magic too. He was glad they had gone to eat first. The magical raised, especially Ron, loved the pizza and fizzy drinks. So, they at least got to enjoy that, before their minds melted. Still, it was kind of funny, their reactions. He couldn't wait for them to see Star Wars, or any of that storyline. Right now, he just smiled and sat back and watched Hermione explain once more that the movie they saw was not made with magic. Tonks and Sirius were getting kicks out of their reactions. Sirius wasn't helping any by constantly stating that it was movie magic. Hermione did level him her best glare, not that it stopped the man, but it did make Harry and Tonks laugh. It was a good day. HP. While Moody and Padfoot were having their tete-a-tete, Snape was harrowing Dumbledore. He had been dying to ask this question for a while but had had little chance to catch the old man alone. So, he was going to take advantage of the fact that they were here now. Why didn't you tell me about the Horcruxes? Severus asked, his voice smooth as silk, hiding his anger at being denied like everyone else. I have been loyal to you and your cause for years. Did you think that I would jump and do the same? Do you really think so little of me? You know that I want the Dark Lord gone as much, even more so, than you do, the greasy-haired man ended up snarling at his mentor. Now, Sirius, you know I hold you in the deep confidence. I merely was not putting temptation in your path, the headmaster cajoled, moving his hands in a calming gesture. How could something I already know about be tempting? If you had merely asked me, I could have helped you hunt them down years ago. When did you find out? Snape snarled, getting up and pacing in front of the old man's desk. I had my suspicions for years, but they were only confirmed during Harry's second year, Albus sighed, rubbing his fingers down his nose, hoping to prevent a headache from forming. He hated taking headache relievers. That long, the other man almost bellowed at him. Why? Why did you not inform those in your trust? Damn it, Albus, this must stop. No one is going to trust you if you keep vital information from them. We are putting our lives on the line for you, Count, he said, slamming his hands down on the desk, making parchment, inkwells, and quills fly everywhere. It was not my intention to cause discontent. I was merely trying to prevent this news from leaking to outside sources. If Tom knows that I know, he might take drastic measure to hide the ones that he has, the headmaster stated, now rubbing his temples. Yes, that headache did appear. That is a load of hippogriff dung, the potions master snapped. The Dark Lord was not capable of doing anything until last year. This could have been over before it started, he said, taking a deep breath and trying to get his emotions under control. There are spells that tell where these vile things are hidden, and nothing the Dark Lord can do will stop that. It is soul magic, he snarled, the look of loathing on his face. Do you know this spell? The headmaster inquired, intrigued that there was such a thing. He had no knowledge on this. His eyes squinted a little from the pain in his head. He really wished people would stop yelling at him. I do not, however, I do know who does, Sirius said, pinching his nose in frustration. I would have asked them immediately had I known. Will you ask this person now? Oh, I would, but you drove him away with your need to keep secrets, Snape said, sneering at the old man with a great deal of disgust. All I can do is apologize, Albus said, giving up and retrieving a headache potion from his desk. Fat lot of good that does. What else are you not telling me? The younger man asked, straightening his non-creased robes. Albus sighed again. He took the potion, closed his eyes and waited for the pain to subside. He then glanced at the young man that he trusted, mostly. Harry Potter is a Horcrux, he stated heavily. Merlin, damn it, Albus, Snape said, losing control over his emotions again. A clemency be damned. What have you done about it? Because as far as I can see, you have done nothing, he added, fixing the other man with an almost hateful glare. There is nothing for me to do. The prophecy says that only Tom can vanquish Harry, or vice versa. The two of them must battle in the end, the old man explained, meeting Severus' eyes and not flinching once. You are a fool, was all Snape said as he twirled around, robes flaring, and left, magically slamming the door behind him. He stormed through the castle, heading straight to McGonagall. If anyone could get a hold of the mutt, she could. He hoped. The portraits gossiped as he passed, spreading the word that the potions master was innocent. They ran from frame to frame, giving out warning to anyone in the halls. Soon enough, Severus was outside Minerva's door. He knocked briskly twice and entered. Severus, what can I do for you? She asked, primly, not getting up from her desk where she was doing her never-ending paperwork. Can you get a hold of Black? The doorman asked, settling in a chair, watching her scribble away. I can, was all she said, though she did look up. There's something he needs to know. It's about Potter, he stated, pinching his nose, for it was now he that was fighting off a headache. Unlike Albus though, he reached into his robes and took the potion for it right away. Let me see if I can call him, she offered, setting down her quill and moving to the flue. She threw the powder in, but Snape couldn't hear the address. The only reason she knew it was because Sirius had given the address to Moody, who gave it to her. With permission, of course. She talked to whoever answered for a few moments, removed her head from the fire and stepped back. Just a moment later, Moody stepped through. After the talk he just had with Sirius, there was no way he was going to let these two men meet anytime soon. "What do you need, Snape?" the grumpy man asked, sitting in a chair on wall. "One set aside for those serving detention." "Where is Black?" was the reply. "You don't want to be in the same room with him right now," was all the old Auror said, stretching out his bad leg. "Fine, Minerva, could we borrow your office for a few moments?" Snape asked, his eyes never leaving the other man. "If I must," she sniffed, and left. "Potter is a Horcrux," Severus said bluntly, because even if he were a nice man, there is no good way to say that. "We know, it's gone. Albus tell you?" Moody said, drinking from his hip flask. "Yes, how did you remove it?" For the sake of curiosity, the younger man asked, leaning forward as if to catch the words sooner. "I don't know really. All I know is that it's gone," Moody said, shrugging his shoulder. "You can tell Albus if you want." "We're down to, but don't tell him that," he said, giving the guy the benefit of the doubt. Not that there was much the spy could do with that. "Well, 3 if you count Riddle," he added with a shrug. "You know where they are?" Snape had to confirm. He knew that this man, and William Weasley, could do the spell he mentioned to Albus. Oh, he knew a few others, but they were the type that could tell the wrong person, the Dark Lord, and he would be dead. "Yep, should have them all before long." "We'll leave the one around Riddle till last," Moody said, giving him enough to hang himself if he turned spy. He didn't think the man would. He knew that Riddle had killed the love of his life, so they might have use for him after all. He'd talk it over with the others. "Do us a favor, Snape, leave the boy and his alone. They are working on this for us." "Do you require my help?" was the actually honest question. "Best not, if you're to be around Riddle, then best keep your nose as clean as it can get," Moody replied. "Though, it would be best if you kept this entire conversation, bar that bit about Harry, to yourself." "Fear not, I am not going to tell anyone, not even Albus, what you have just told me. I would caution that Potter keep up on his occlumency. His defenses are solid, but if he relaxes them, he is an open book," the greasy-haired man said, standing up and leaving the room. "Right," Moody grumbled to himself, and Minerva came back in. "Did you learn what he wanted?" she asked, settling down at her desk and picking up her quill. "Yeah," he sighed, lumbering out of the chair. "I'd best get back. Black is going to want to hear this." With that he flew to Sirius' house. "What did Snivellus want?" Sirius asked, not really caring but curious. "Albus told him about Harry," was the vague answer. "What about me?" the boy in question asked as he friends all turned to the Exoror. "Never you mind that now. I'm sure if you think really hard you can answer that question yourself," Alastor said, giving him a pointed look. Harry blushed, and it did only take him a second to figure it out. Now, he had the gazes of everyone 17 and under. He just smirked and shrugged. They all sighed in frustration and went back to talking about which movie they wanted to see next. "Did you tell him?" Sirius asked, Keeping is vague. I did. He deserved it, since he tried to warn us. We might want to put whatever nefarious things you've got percolating in your head on the back burner, Moody suggested, ending the topic. Right, fine, I'll leave the greasy git alone, the other man conceded. Bill came in the house right then, nodded and winked to the older men and winked at Tonks. So enough, everyone else was piling in the kitchen and they all discussed their day. Most of the adults were smiling at the Weasleys, they did enjoy it the first time an all-magical family got exposed to the cinema. It was always a treat how they reacted. There's a meeting after dessert, Sirius announced, watching Andy, Tonks and Harry argue with the house elves about cooking dinner. Okay, was the reply of many adults. Harry, you don't need to be there, the dogman said, getting the boys' attention. You already know what it's about, he finished, nodding towards him to see if he understood. He broke away from his argument and nodded back. The rest of the night, before the meeting, was just one joyous family get-together. The meeting got underway as soon as the teens all trooped upstairs. Andy and Ted, as usual, went with them. They felt that they would be better served to tend the children, as well as keep up their jobs. Not that they needed them, now that Sirius had brought them back into the family, but still. Sirius watched them leave, and as soon as the doors sealed, he sat at the head of the table wondering how he wound up with the leadership of this unnamed group. All right, everyone, settle down. First, I have something to say. I talked to Fudge and Umbitch, I did tell them to leave me and mine alone, as well as a few other things, but I don't think they took me seriously. What else did you do, besides threaten them? Which, by the way, I'm going to ignore, Amelia asked, hoping that she did not have to arrest this man tonight. I served Fudge some papers, Black said with a shrug, then grimaced. I warned him to keep Harry away from his vitriol. He didn't listen. He'll find out tomorrow that he is an idiot. There was an article that was supposed to be printed in tomorrow's edition of the Prophet. How did you find out? I mean, if the paper doesn't come out until tomorrow, how did you learn about it? Tonks asked, grabbing some of the leftover dessert. Oh, well, I have an in there, the dogman said, smugly, and they sent it to me. It looks like my warning made the man stupider than I thought he was. Waters will be serving him papers in first thing in the morning. Amelia, that means we're making it criminal, so heads up on that. Madam Bones, head of the DMLE, looked like you'll had come early. I don't know whether to kiss you or hex you. Why would you want to hex me? The confused man asked, knowing he was handing her a criminal on a silver platter. Paperwork, was all the answer that was needed, making anyone who had ever done paperwork cringe, while the others laughed. Sorry, Sirius chuckled. Also, I will be taking up my seat on the board. I sent my confirmation in earlier this week. I made sure to tell them that Malfoy should have never sat in my chair. I let them know that I will be there, and there will be a reckoning. What about the Wizengamot? Kingsley asked, sipping some strong coffee. His working with the group and doing his job was taking more of his sleep time than he liked. But it was infinitely better that working with Dumbledore had been. His vision was clear on that now. No more rose-colored glasses for him. Albus was not the man he thought he was. The Wizengamot is not scheduled until after the kids go back to school. So, I will take that seat back then. I'm done. Who else has news? He asked, sipping some fire whiskey. We scouted Malfoy Manor, Kingsley said, pointing between him and Bill. There's no new news there. Damn, was the comment from quite a few. All right, Tonks, how's your shadowing going? Sirius asked his baby cousin. All right, I guess. It's different being a boy. Not that I'm changing completely, but being even half male throws my balance off even more. That, and I can't fly as well as Harry, so I'm going to have to quit the Quidditch team, she added, looking at the twins. We'll make up some excuse that Harry had a magical accident this summer. We'll hash it out before we go back, Fred said, with George nodding along. George was already writing down some scenarios on a piece of parchment, with Fred leaning over and pointing at things to add or change. If need be, we'll even take the blame and call it a joke product gone wrong. Let me see what you come up with before you implement anything, Moody said, leveling his good eye at the two teens. Sure, Fred said, nodding in his direction. No problem, George agreed, not looking up from his musing. Remus looked up from what he could see of the parchment that the twins were writing on. Tonks, I think we can also come up with a few things to help your balance. 1. Is take the same dance lessons that Harry is taking. Or 2, we can create some shoes that will keep you standing. Or both, he said to the young woman with an encouraging smile. Both, I think, she answered, thoughtfully. Truth be told, her mum never made her take lessons. It was always thought that she was too clumsy. Good, good, Sirius said, looking around the room. Does anyone have anything else? Snape told me that Albus told him that Harry is a Horcrux. I set him straight, but the fact is that he came to me with that information. So, while I still want you to watch him, Tonks, try and see if he's, I don't know, changed, or no longer Albus sycophant, Moody said, pinning her with his magical eye. I can do that, she said slowly. Great, the leader of this band of vigilantes, who has time to teach Harry what he needs to know? And he has etiquette, he added. Ted is going over laws and such. I do, said Bill, Remus, Shacklebolt, Alastair, and strangely Amelia. Amelia? Moody questioned. I can come in the evenings and teach him some Auror tricks. Not that you can't, Alastair, just that I want to help, she said, shrugging her shoulders. It would take a bit of her time, but she wanted to stay in the loop. All right, I think we've covered everything. Kings, you and Bill, keep a lookout on the manor. Report any illegal doings to Amelia. Remus, you and Moody keep in contact with the underbelly, not Fletcher, see if you can get any news on what's going on there. I don't want to be surprised if Riddle gets up an army of dark creatures, Sirius said, handing out assignments. What will you be doing, Black? Moody asked. Amelia and I are going to keep an eye on the ministry, he answered. We have a lot of people to keep an eye on. The place is crawling with Death Eaters. Makes me want to test the field and see if I can. Never mind, he said when he spotted Amelia glaring at him. Then he got a wicked idea. He looked at the twins, who uncannily looked up, he nodded and winked. They smiled. We're going to get some pranks together with Tonks here. We might come up with some stuff that will be helpful in a fight, Fred said, folding the parchment he and his brother had been working on. They played it off like they hadn't just made a deal with the devil. That's all right, they like this devil. Yeah, with her input we could do some major damage, agreed George. We'll put our heads together tomorrow, Tonks said, nodding her agreement. Let us know what you come up with at the next meeting. I know you guys want to open a shop, and I'll help fund it. If you get good grades, and help Harry, or Tonks in this case, at school, Sirius offered, thinking on how smart these two kids were. They had to be geniuses, to do what they do. Not even the Marauders had come up with some of the stuff they did. Though, the Marauders were more charms and transfiguration, while the twins were more potions and, if he had to guess, alchemy. Truly, Fred said, excitedly. That would be wicked, George agreed. I'll even pitch in, Alastair said, shocking everyone. What, I have gold, and I'm not betting on seeing the end of this war. I have no family, and these kids are doing good. Why not, he huffed. Right, that's it for tonight, we'll meet again in a few days. If something comes up, just message me or Alastair and we'll call another one. Not that most of you aren't staying here anyway, but Amelia and Kingsley need to be informed, Sirius said, standing and putting his glass in the sink. HP. Time went on, and many things just kinda stood still. While the teens and Tonks went out to see movies, after they all made sure that the summer homework was done and checked. It was a good time for them, but not such for the adults. The Weasleys were getting better about being in the non-magical world. They were seeing more and more why their dad was fascinated with them. Though, they could also tell that their father was completely clueless. From what they were learning, their dad never really got out into this world. It was more like he was learning by reading through a fishbowl or something. The man didn't even get what they were telling him about during their daily chats. It was kinda depressing. But they vowed to get the poor man some educational literature. Maybe that would open his eyes. While the movies they watched were sometimes violent, Hermione and Harry assured them that, no, Muggles don't have spaceships that can blow up the Earth. That was a fun talk. Ron didn't sleep for days, he was so worried. It took Harry taking him to the library, where they got on the computer and Ron could read just how far every country was at in the space race. So while he still fretted, it wasn't as bad. Susan came along with her friend Hannah. They didn't want to be in the manor when Amelia wasn't around. These two girls were more versed on the non-magical world than the Weasleys. Though, they too had a lot to learn. Still, it was fun to have more people. That and the adults were teaching them to get away if there was trouble. They never left the house without at least one adult with them. Be it one of the elder Tonkses, Tonks, or Sirius. Amelia didn't go that often. She had too much work to do. The group was at an impasse on getting the Horcruxes. While they knew there were two at Malfoy Manor, including Riddle, the wards were just too risky to break until they got the other Horcrux. As it was, the adults were making battle plans to storm the manor, for when the twins found the one at Hogwarts. Dobby helped immensely when Harry pointed out that he used to be their elf. Sirius and Moody sat the elf down and drew up the blueprints of the place. Dobby knew where every hidden nook and cranny was, and he had no problem selling his old master out. It was planned that when the look-alike boys did find it, they would call Kreaker and he would retrieve it for them. Then when the adults had it in hand, they would then raid Malfoy Manor. Even Amelia was on board with that. She couldn't join, but she was going to look the other way. She warned Kingsley and Tonks not to get caught. She could not help them if they were indicated in any way. They agreed, though. Tonks pointed out that she was going to be at Hogwarts. Probably, that all depended on how soon Umbridge messed up. The wagers were 10-1 that it would be the first week. If that happened, then Tonks could leave. Which she would have to do anyway, because she would be the arresting officer. Andy and Ted would stay at Grimmauld Place and destroy the Horcruxes they had. As soon as they got a Patronus message to do so. There was a fresh stock of basilisk venom, which Dobby had got from the chamber. There was enough to do that job, and plans were made to see what could be salvaged from the rest of the corpse. But that was for later. The biggest debate right now was whether or not to bring Harry. Since he wouldn't be in school, and they were going to do their best to train him. It was an open suggestion that he should be there to fulfill the prophecy that no one really believed it. There were ideas on how he could use his invisibility cloak to stay in the background and kill the snake, which they were 85% sure was the last Horcrux. If he did, then anyone could kill the dork idiot. Since they didn't know the wording of the prophecy, they figured it was close the heck enough. "I want to help," Harry said for what seemed like the millionth time. "I know you do, and you will. But we've got to train you up a bit. Right now, Riddle is laying low, and Dumbledore it being useless, so we will use this time to get in some fighting lessons. None of the dueling shite, real fighting. Moody and Mooney are going to start those when the others have gone off to Hogwarts," Sirius repeated for the millionth time. Yes, they had this conversation before. It wasn't that they were being obstinate, just that Harry wanted to get it over with now, while Sirius wanted to be cautious. His days of running headlong into battle were over. "I know, you've said that, but I just feel like I'm wasting my time doing nothing," the teen complained, being stubborn as usual. "Those tricks you guys have been teaching us are only for getting away. I need to be able to fight. I know I said I wanted to wait for the rest to leave, but can't we start now?" "Yes, we can," Sirius said, giving in, yet smirking. "Tonks," he called up the stairs. "What's up, cousin?" the Metamorphose asked as she descended the steps. "Can you change into Harry? I know you've been following him around for weeks now, but I want him to see what he'll look like when he learns to fight," the dogman said, folding his arms, that smirk still playing on his lips. "What? Sirius, you're not making sense," Tonks said, seeing the man was up to something. No, go ahead, I just want him to see how far he has to go," Sirius stated, waving his hand for her to get on with it. "In the basement?" she asked, turning that direction. "Yeah, that'll work," was the agreed answer. The two men followed Tonks down the stairs, to a much improved basement. Gone were the implements of torture and cells. In their place was a workout room, and a sparring room. "How do you want to do this?" the Metamorphmagus asked, changing into Harry. They had been working on her balance for weeks, and it showed. She no longer bled when she changed. And her dancing was coming along great. She should have done this years ago. Just a bit of a spar for now. Nothing over fifth year stuff. "Also, make him dance," Sirius said, his grin never faltered, if anything it got bigger. "Do you have any idea how weird it is to stare at yourself, knowing it's not you?" Harry said as he crossed a room to stand opposite of his double. "Ask the twins," Sirius said, barking with laughter. "Prat," Harry said, lifting his wand. "Ready," the not Harry said, lifting his wand was well. "Bring it," the boy who lived said, getting into a fighting stance. And he did. HP. Tonks wiped the floor with Harry. Well and truly. Harry hadn't lasted 5 minutes, and she made him get up and try again. At least 20 times. But now, he was wiped out. The poor boy was laying flat on his back, arms spread to his sides, eyes closed and breathing hard. She was ruthless, much like her mother, only with a wand and not a book, or music. She was also being mean and laughing at him. Twit. "That's what you need to learn," Sirius said, leaning over the prone boy, a smug smile on his face. "You will not learn it in a few weeks. It'll take years to get as good as her. Decades to get as good and me, when I get back up to speed, and Mooney. Even longer for someone of Moody's caliber. Old as he is, that man is a beast with a wand. I won't even touch on Riddle or Dumbledore. How am I supposed to defeat Harry started, his arm over his eyes. You're not. We know that there's a prophecy that might state that it's you, but Harry, we ignored that for a reason. You know all about self-fulfilling prophecies. I know you learned at least that much in divinations. The others and I are doing our best to make sure that you don't have to fight anyone, Sirius said seriously. Fine, Harry said, huffing out the word, uncovering his eyes and glaring at the man. Not because he was angry, more because he was being put on the sidelines. Ah, teenagers. Harry huffed again, and then tried to sit up, but his body said no, rest, stupid, so he fell back down. You will teach me, right, was the almost plea. He turned his head towards his brother and smiled. Even if I don't have to fight him, odds are that I will face him in some capacity. I said I would, didn't I? His brother answered, reaching down and helping the teen sit up, then joining him on the floor. If you find yourself face to face with Riddle, I want to make sure you know enough to get away. You're not bad for a going-on fifth-year student, Tonks said, morphing back to her original state. You are actually pretty good, for a 15-year-old. But, you need to learn to duck and dodge too. I'm not sure how you survived Riddle 5 times, but it wasn't you dueling skills. If what you believe will happen, happens, then yes, you need to be able to get away, she added with a knowledgeable nod of her head. I know, Harry sighed, leaning against Sirius. It was luck mostly. Potter luck is legendary, his older brother agreed, nodding his head sagely, though a grin split his face. Your dad could get into the weirdest shite. One time he found himself hanging from the astronomy tower. No idea how he got there, but as luck would have it, pun intended, his pajama pants were caught on a jutting brick. He was able to pull himself up with little problem. Did you guys ever find out who did it? Harry asked, feeling empathy with his dad. No, but we narrowed it down to either Lily or Snivellis. Oh, why Mum? The tired boy asked, sitting up straight. Your mum hated your dad until 6th year. This was in our 3rd. He would constantly badger her for dates, or lay into her for being friends with Snape, the dogman answered, with eyes misty from the memories. The arguments those two got into were legendary. Sounds like Ron and Hermione, Harry mused, wondering if would end up married like his parents. Yeah, it does. I don't know how many times I've made that comparison, Sirius said with a chuckle. Wait, Snape was friends with my mum, the boy exclaimed, falling backwards to land on his elbows. That was a shocker. To think his mum was nice to that person. Yeah, didn't you know that, was the question. I would have thought someone would have told you by now. Wasn't Remus your teacher for a whole year? Yeah, but I didn't find out his was my dad's friend until almost the middle of the year, Harry explained. I'm going to have to ask him about that. I'm sure the answer will start with Dumbledore said, Sirius said with a bitter bite to his tone. Probably, Harry agreed. Still he was friends with Mum. From before Hogwarts. Your dad on the other hand was hated enemy, well, as much as an 11-year-old can be. I have to say, the things we did to Snape, looking back were pretty bad. Did you bully him? Harry asked tentatively. Yeah, I'd say we were tough on him. I would apologize to the man, but there isn't anything I can say to him to change his mind. He's been festering those feelings for years. I'm sure if James knew that he would someday take it out on you, we would never had done what we did, Sirius said, hanging his head a bit. He still didn't like Snape, and the man was a bastard of high caliber. But, they were out of line as teens. I guess that's why he hates me. I don't know whether to feel sorry for him or pity the fact that he has become what he despises, Harry said, thoughtfully, looking back on all his interaction with the potions master. You are a kid, it's his fault he's a right arse. Since you're not going back you don't have to worry about him ever again, Sirius almost growled his response. Hey, Sirius, Tonks interrupted, getting off the wall and sitting on the floor next to Harry. Whatever happened to you two suing Fudge? I mean that was weeks ago. She had been standing at the door to let the two talk but decided that they needed to switch subjects. What article? Harry asked, turning toward Tonks. The one that Fudge tried to have printed about Sirius here. Something about him being to blame for all the shite that they've been saying about you and the headmaster, she explained, tapping her wand on her knee. He was even going as far as to say that Sirius had confounded you in your third year. So, it was plausible that he was doing the same now. Yeah, I tried to tell him that Sirius was innocent, but Snape told the man we were confounded, and that Sirius has always been a bad apple, Harry said, anger lacing his voice. Now that he knew the history, somewhat, he could understand why the potions master hated Sirius, but that didn't mean he liked the man. Or that he would forgive him for not listening to him and his friends. Because now that he thought about it, the man just wanted to see Sirius dead. He didn't care if he was innocent. Right, well, it was all poised to get custody of you away from him. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll lay bets that it was either Malfoy or Dumbledore is behind it, she added thoughtfully. You're probably right. I got it stopped and put waters on it, but the stupid man got Lucy to pay others off. More than likely to cover his own involvement. Fudge is on probation though, and it's going as evidence for my lawsuit, which is still being stalled by red tape. Sirius was both smug and upset. What red tape? Harry asked. Bureaucratic bullshit, mostly, his brother said, sighing at the injustice of it all. How did you stop the article? Tonks asked, leaning forward and resting her elbows on her knees. Well, I purchased the Daily Prophet, so now there will be no more articles that are defamatory, the older man said, twirling his wand with his fingers. Skeeter is a thing of the past. She will never print another article in the Prophet, and if she's smart she'll go abroad. Wait, you bought the Prophet? Harry asked, completely floored by that. So many surprises in one night. At least this one was a good one. It wasn't easy. I had to use quite a bit of my aunt's book, but I got it done, the dogman said, once more looking smug. Didn't you notice all that vitriol had stopped? Yeah, I just thought they were tired of dragging my name through the mud, the teen said, wiggling his shoulders to get the kinks out. He tilted his head side to side, and heard his neck pop. Sighing in relief, he just relaxed. Nope, I required them to take a vow, was the still smug reply. Which is why Skeeter is gone. She couldn't tell the truth if you I used her. Ain't that the truth, Harry grumbled, rubbing his nose under his glasses. Don't let my mum hear you use that word. It's not proper, Tonks said, changing her face and voice to match her mum's. I wonder why the book list isn't here, Harry said, ignoring Tonks with practiced ease. She had been trailing him for weeks now, and she was getting pretty good at being him. Sirius said he was trying to find a Pensiev so they could see his reactions to others, like Malfoy and his gang of thugs. Not to mention Snape. It would all be for naught if that man got wind of what they were doing. Sure, he told Moody something important, doesn't make him a good man. With Umbridge joining Hogwarts' merry band of professors, I'll bet it's taken her this long to find a worthless book, Sirius said, standing up and heading for the door. The other two joining him. Why do you think that? Tonks asked, bringing up the rear. She's useless. Since she can't teach, she'll need something that will make her look smart, the dogman said with shrug. Probably, the other two grumbled, walking up the stairs to the kitchen, one dead tired, the other mildly winded. We need to get your stamina up. Knowing all the spells in the world doesn't do a thing if you tire this quickly, Tonks said, putting her arm around his waist, giving him something to lean on. One would think that all those stairs at Hogwarts would make the students fitter. I mean, there's millions of them, Harry said, using her as a crutch. Yeah, but you get used to them after first year, so you're not putting any more effort into exercising, she said, using her free hand to pat his head. Fine, Harry grumbled and then went to his room. The other two did the same. Another week went by, with Harry training almost 24/7. Well, not quite, but it felt like it. Seems the adults had taken him at his word and started a harsh training regimen. The other teens joined in when they could, which was often. Most of them were happy for something to do, but they weren't sure if exercise was better. Ron, Hermione, and Ginny took to it at a slow pace. They had never done anything like this in their lives. Hermione had always put the least amount of effort in PE. She was not an athlete, so did not consider it something she should participate in. It was the only class she ever got below a high score. Still, they trudged on, and were getting better by the day. The twins, on the other hand, took Tonks down 2 times out of 5. Their chaotic style was not something she had run across before. It was like dueling monkeys on a sugar high. They were everywhere, and they were noisy. Constantly taunting her and each other. It was interesting, to say the least. Though, it did give her some practice for when she would have to fight someone like her aunt, Bellatrix. Hopefully, that will never happen. That woman was crazy before Azkaban. During that week, Sirius did score a Pensieve and he and Tonks got to learn what the Golden Trio got up to their first 4 years. It was an eye-opening experience. She would now know how to react to his teachers, acquaintances, and enemies. She knew just what to do to trip Umbridge up as well. Harry had no filter on his mouth. If he thought it, 9 times out of 10, he said it. Since that woman was going to be there to catch Dumbledore in the act, and debase Harry, so to speak, it should be easy to get in trouble. Finally, the book list showed. Sirius took one look at it and scoffed. Like I said, a useless book. You would do better buying a 5th-year defense book and glamoring it to look like this trash, he said, throwing the list on the table. Is it really that bad? Hermione asked, studying the titles on her list to see if she had any of them. She did, about 5. It is, stated Tonks, reading Harry's list. This was going to be her first foray into being Harry. She was going to do his shopping. He was going under glamour, and not with the group. He would be with Remus, and they would get the books needed for his tutoring. That book is all theory. There are no spells, or defensive moves. It's all theoretical. It's like the Ministry doesn't want you guys to learn how to defend yourselves. Remember, Umbridge is there to prevent Dumbledore from forming an army, Sirius said, rolling his eyes at the stupidity of the man. If Moody ever caught me reading that book, he'd burn it from my hands. That's how bad it is. I have no idea how it even got published as a school book, Tonks said, putting the list on the table and watching their reactions. The twins' lips thinned, they would probably follow Sirius' advice. Ron and Ginny were torn, they didn't want their family to spend money on a worthless book, but they didn't want to get caught either. If that woman was as bad as Tonks and Sirius said, then who knows what kind of detention she would force them to do. And wasn't it sad that they would fear punishment from their school? Hermione looked like she was just going to grab every book in the store that was associated with the owls. She wasn't going to let some faux teacher ruin her perfect grades. She already had a plan in mind to help those in her house, and maybe others as well. Well, not sense dilly-dallying, let's go to Diagon Alley, Sirius said, hauling himself out of the chair. Then lifting an eyebrow that the others were too slow in his opinion. Wait, we don't have any money. Dad was going to give us some after he got off work, Ron said, looking around the room like his dad was going to pop out of the fireplace. Don't worry, I've got you covered. Your dad can pay me back later, Sirius said, waving his hand dismissively. Are you sure? Fred asked, giving him a hairy eyeball. You're not trying to give us charity, are you? George asked, also suspicious. No, I'll make sure that your dad knows how much he owes, the man prevaricated. So, what if what Sirius thought the man owed, and what the cost was, wasn't the same? Who would know? We're watching you, the twins threatened. Not that they were in any way serious. After all, they could afford to buy their own stuff, what with the profits they've had so far on their mail-order joke products. The closer it got time for school, the more orders they got. Sirius had let them be added to the mail ward so they could make some money. Who was he to stand in the way of budding entrepreneurs? Go on, get ready, Sirius said, ignoring them with practiced ease. He waved his hands shooing the teens along. Harry and Remus weren't going today, they would go when Hogwarts started, so Harry was a bit miffed that he was staying put. But he did understand the need for Tonks to go. He really hoped nothing happened. HP. The gang all came down the stairs. Tonks dressed in some of Harry's better clothes. She might have to pretend to be him, but she'd be damned if she were going to dress in his cousin's old hand-me-downs. Though, Harry now wore regular stuff, they were trying to make it as believable as possible, so some older stuff was called for. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, she morphed into the boy who lived. These past weeks had made this a smooth process. The hardest part of it all was Harry's scar. It took days for her to get it right. Even though the boy's scar was nothing but a white line now, no one outside this house knew that. Looking good, Tonks, Harry said, teasingly. Don't you know it, she said back, winking at him. Wait, before you guys head out, who made prefect this year? Harry asked, a bit shocked that neither he nor Ron got a badge. He was completely floored that Hermione didn't have one either. Even if she wasn't the smartest girl, which she totally was, he didn't see either Parvati or Lavender being responsible enough for that position. Oh my, with all that's happened, I forgot that that was this year for us, Hermione said, grabbing her letter out of her purse. Yeah, me too, until just now, Harry admitted. Ron was looking at his letter as well. Well, it's not me, I don't think, he grumbled. Good job, Dad, the twins said, patting him on the back proudly. Bugger off, the youngest male snapped. Language, said the three females. Leave him alone, you two. It's not nice to rub it in like that, Ginny said, standing up for her brother. We're just taking the mickey, Fred said, smiling and holding his hands up in surrender. Yeah, just playing, his twin agreed, grinning like a fool. Oh, there's a postscript on the back. Professor McGonagall says that there's a dispute about the Gryffindor fifth-year male prefect, so it will be announced at the feast, Hermione said, reading the small note. Probably because I told her what Tonks and we are up to, Sirius said thoughtfully, rubbing his goatee. Oh, does that mean it would have been Harry? The bushy-haired girl asked, her face brightening. Well, I don't want it, even if I was going back. The last thing I want is that type of responsibility. I mean, I get enough crap from being on the Quidditch team since first year, Harry groused, remembering all the flack he got for being a teacher pet, or some shite. It wasn't like he asked to be on the team. He didn't know anything about Quidditch then, only what Ron had told him on the train. Besides, I can see it now, he only got it because Dumbledore believes his lies, or something along those lines, he added, his face taking on a full scowl. I'm sure it wouldn't be that bad, Hermione said, biting her lower lip like she didn't completely believe that. I wonder who the fifth-year girl is, she said, looking around the room like the walls would have the answer. I'm sure you got the badge, Ron said, smiling at his best female friend. However, they're probably right, and it was Harry, until he went and ruined it for them. So sad, he added, mockingly pouting at his other friend. Too right, Harry said, nodding like it was not made in jest. Well, now that that's settled, Tonks said, giving a meaningful look to Sirius, which looked strange since it was Harry's face. Right, let's get going, the dogman said, heading to the flue. A great deal of happy murmuring was heard as the teens, Sirius and Tonks went the fireplace. It only took a matter of moments for the room to be empty of all but Harry. Remus was in the library, and the other members of the group were scattered about doing either their jobs or watching Malfoy Manor. Harry sighed and went to join Remus. He thought again that he hoped nothing happened. Meanwhile the group of teens were chattering happily as they went about getting their school supplies. They made a great game of testing Tonks in her role. She did a great job of being Harry Potter. Right down to the exasperation of those that either were staring at her like she was going to go postal, or coming up to her telling her that they believed her and what a nice boy she was for saying those nice things about Cedric. It was a trying time, they had to got through all that in every store they entered. Tonks' acting skills were getting quite a workout. She was just glad that Malfoy or his cronies weren't around. She wasn't sure if she could stand up to that with this big of an audience. On the train it would be different, the others would do more about taming the little git than she would. She was going to play wounded hero, and sulk most of the trip. They hurried as much as they were able, going in and out of each store as quickly as they could. It made it easier that Sirius would tell each cashier to charge it to his account, putting his key on the receipt, and then moving on. Each of them took Sirius' advice and got the grade 5 defense book. Hermione bought the other one, so she could read it and tell the others what it said, just in case there was a pop quiz, or something. They were just finishing their purchases in Flourish and Blots when it got very cold. Sirius shivered, and huddled to the ground, until the twins came to him and lifted him up. They stayed by his side giving him words of encouragement, but he was completely blanked out, until Ron shoved chocolate in his mouth. Then he shook his head and looked fearfully at the window. It was dark, like clouds had come and covered the sun. The teens, now that Sirius was feeling better, ran to the windows to see what was happening. They knew what it was, by Sirius' reaction, but they needed to know if anyone was stopping the Dementors from feeding. There wasn't. Some were trying, but not succeeding. Tonks, still as Harry, was going to run outside to stop the Dementors that she saw was about to kiss a man. The man next to him did get a missed Patronus off, but it only held the creature back. Tonks, wait, Hermione hissed, while grabbing the Metamorphose's elbow, making her glare at the younger girl. Do you know the Patronus? She asked quickly. Yeah, Harry's been teaching me, the Auror said back, pulling herself out of the other girl's grip. Is it a stag? the bushy-haired girl asked, lifting an eyebrow. No, Tonks said slowly, then realized why Hermione asked. Good call, she said as she rushed to the store's loo. She quickly transfigured her clothes, morphed into herself, then ran out to go deal with the Dementors. Many people were running into the stores and only a few were trying to keep the 5 creatures away. They were having some luck when Tonks came to the scene. She immediately fired off her Patronus and soon had them flying away. It was all over in less than 5 minutes, but she had to stay until the on-duty Aurors showed up, so she could give her report. The teens didn't join her, on the advice of Sirius. He held them back at the store when they wanted to fight. No, there's too much political bullshit right now. If you guys get involved, that will just make it harder for what you have to do at Hogwarts. More people will be watching you and you wouldn't have time to do what's needed. Remember, you're our eyes and ears at the school. Don't go blowing it now for something Tonks can easily take care of, he lectured, making sure they stayed put. He was still shaking, he knew that he may never get over his fear of Dementors. But, by Merlin, he was going to find out how the hell sent them to Diagon Alley, when it was full of families. If he had it right, it was that Umbitch bitch. He was going to gut her, and make it look like an accident. Well, probably not, but by Merlin if it was her, he was going to blow her cover sky high. She would never live down the damage he was going to do to her. Maybe, he could find out where her father was. It would be a nice family reunion. But where? In the Great Hall, the atrium of the Ministry, or even right here in Diagon Alley during the Yule/Christmas shopping. Decisions, decisions. The teens did stop and think, they hated to admit it, but he had a point. They had no idea who would come to the scene. It could be someone in Malfoy's, Fudge's, or Dumbledore's pocket. It was too big of a risk. Sure enough, a few moments later, someone that was beholden to each of those factions was there. Making a mess of the crime scene, and generally be a nuisance of themselves. Tonks and Shacklebolt were having a rough time getting the witness reports, with everyone trying to be more important than they were. Seeing that they weren't going to be asked anything, the group finished their shopping. Tonks, when she saw they were leaving, just gave a quick nod to Sirius that she would fill them in later, and then she left with the Aurors. Back at the house, Harry was starting to get worried. He wondered if he was going to feel like this the entire time the others were in school. He knew that if something happened, he was going to blame himself for not being there. It was one of his faults that he was working hard on correcting, but after being blamed for everything that went wrong in the Dursleys' house all his life, it was going to be hard to kick. Harry, sit down and quit pacing, Remus said, putting the book he was perusing. They'll be fine. They've all gotten good enough to avoid trouble. Besides, Tonks and Sirius are with them. If you were there, there would be more issues. Tonks can duck out at any time. Don't worry about her. He was one of those that was tasked in helping him get over his Survivor's Guild problem. I know, I just can't shake the feeling, is all, Harry said as he thumped down into a chair. He grabbed a book, looked at the title, then threw it back on the pile. I can't concentrate, he grumbled. Why don't you go down to the basement and do some spell work, the werewolf suggested, picking up his cold tea and making a face when he sipped it. Sirius and the others don't want me down there by myself, the boy whined. It wasn't that they didn't trust him, it was the fact that he tended to train himself incorrectly. Then they had to break him of the bad form and retrain him. He didn't understand why that happened, but since it did on a regular basis, he complied. I'll go with you. I've pretty much tapped out of what I can find here, the other man said, putting the disgusting tea down and standing. He was working on how to get into the Malfoy manor. They had plans to get to the house, but they were working on what wards to throw up so that they could trap those in the house. Bill had some great goblin wards, but was barred from showing them, or even using them, under his employee contract. The black wards tended to hurt the victim and the caster, since they required some sort of sacrifice. That was not something any of them were willing to do. However, they were hopeful that there was something in this library that could be helpful. Moody was going through all his old books and notes. He remembered something, vaguely, and was trying to find it. All in all, they were going to be prepared come hell or high water. This was the darkest of Dark Lord in centuries. They weren't going to take any chances. When the kids were in bed at night, they all tended to spar. The first time they did it, it was an eye-opening experience. Most of them sucked, big time. All but Kingsley and Tonks were out of practice. Him, because he never thought he needed it. Sirius because of Azkaban. Moody, because he spent a year in his trunk. Bill was okay, but he spent more time taking down curses than fighting, so he needed it as well. All right, Harry sighed, making the werewolf come back out of his thoughts, putting his hands on his knees and standing as well. I'm on offensive stuff now, he added, a bit hopefully. What year? The older man asked, leaving the room. Harry followed right behind him. Well, we're not really doing so much as which year, 'cause we're starting from year 1, but doing all the stuff they don't teach at Hogwarts. So, I guess, maybe, year 4, Harry said, thinking hard on where he and Sirius and Tonks had stopped last night. I can work with that, Remus said, leading the way down the stairs. I talked with Sirius the other day. I owe you an apology, he said softly, paying particular attention to a spot on the wall in front of him. Like he didn't want to see the expression on Harry's face. About, the boy asked, knowing what it might be, but wanting to make sure. When I taught you in your 3rd year, I was told by Dumbledore that you had expressed your opinion that it hurt too much to talk about your parents. I took him at his word. Even going so far as to ignore the way your eyes lit up whenever I mentioned your dad, the werewolf sighed, still looking at the wall as he walked. There are times I hate that man. I mean, who the hell does he think he is, putting words in my mouth, Harry said, balling his hands into fist. I know, and I am sorry. I figured it was hard for me to talk about your folks, so it was not out of the realm of possibilities that it was hard for you as well, Remus explained. Stopping at the bottom of the stairs and turning to look at Harry. I guess I understand that. Sirius says it's hard for him too. He said, the more he talks about them, the easier it is. But in the beginning it hurt, the teen said, looking at the floor. Remus tilted his chin up and smiled. Well, now that we know that, we'll just have to talk about them more often, yeah. Yeah, Harry said, a smile splitting his face, HP. Harry heard the group flew in, and he rushed up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Remus was not far behind him. As he skidded into the kitchen, he noted that they were all pale, pinch-faced, and drawn. What happened? He questioned, going to his brother, who looked the worse of the bunch. Dementors, they all said, sitting in the nearest chairs. Sirius was shaking still and ordered Creaker to fetch some hot chocolate. After a moment cups appeared around the table. Everyone grabbed one and started sipping. Even Harry and Remus, who had been at the house. Hot chocolate was a cure-all for everything, according to Remus. Shite, Harry cursed, picking up his cup, a frown marring his face. Where's Tonks? He asked, looking around. He took a sip and glanced around the table waiting for someone to answer. The elves popped in and distributed more chocolate, liquid or otherwise. Dobby was setting about refilling the hot cocoa since Sirius and Ron gulped theirs down, not caring how hot it was. She had to change into herself and fight the Dementors. Good thing you helped her with that. Can you do that for the rest of us? Hermione asked, taking a small bite of some candy, closing her eyes at the feeling of warmth that spread throughout her body. You leave tomorrow, Harry pointed out, rubbing his brother's back, trying to snap the man out of the daze he seemed to be in. Right, I meant, when we are all together again, she said, still basking in the warm feeling. I know the basics, but I'm having a bit of difficulty getting the memory right, she confessed. Yeah, I can do that. I know how hard it is to get the correct memory. How about we communicate over the mirrors while you're at school, he offered, giving his friend a small smile. That would be wonderful, Harry. Thank you, she said, returning his smile with a glowing grin. By the way, are you joining us for the Christmas holiday? I mean, aren't your parents going to want you home? You've been here all summer, Harry inquired, realizing that her folks might be miffed that their daughter was missing from their home for the better part of the year. I am going to see them the first week of break, she said, tapping her chin in thought. They're still out of the country, and Sirius said he can get me a portkey to where they are. So, they're not as upset as you would think. They know that they're in danger, and they have taken a job, I guess you can call it, overseas for the next 5 years. I had to promise to spend more time with them once this whole war is over. That bit of news had both Harry and Sirius sigh in relief. Hermione was the only one who had parents that could not defend themselves. Well, Neville's parents were pretty much in the same boat, but they were protected in St. Mungo's. If all hell broke loose, then his grandmother could transport them to their manor. Thinking on that, Harry decided to write Neville with that bit of advice. Oh, well, that's good, I reckon, the dark-haired teen said, nodding his head in agreement that her parents were safer out of the country. Why did they decide to leave? He asked, looking to his brother, who seemed to come out of his Dementor coma. Did you have something to do with it? I did help them, Sirius confessed, his face still pale, but he was feeling more like himself. When they tried to stop my post to you, I got in touch with the DRS Granger, and gave them the news that Riddle was back and that they might want to leave. At first, they were upset that their daughter was in danger, still are I'm sure, then they realized it would hamper Hermione for them to stay. So, they took a volunteer job in Africa, I think, he added, taking a huge hip of his cocoa. And I, for one, will be ever so grateful to you for being one of the only adults to think of my parents, Hermione said, grabbing a hold of his arm and squeezing it. Now that I know what you did, I feel like an idiot for thinking that you only ever thought of yourself, she said, her eyes a bit misty. It's all right, Hermione, I understand, the dogman said, finally getting some color back in his face. Right, now that that is settled, what now? Ron asked, eating a huge chunk of chocolate, then talking with it still melting in his mouth. Something he never grew out of, no matter how many times he was chastised. We got all our books and stuff. And we have the house elves to pack them, so what say we have a going away party tonight, he asked, trying to lighten the mood. Who would we invite so last minute? Ginny asked, after she slapped his head for talking with his mouth full. I guess, we can ask everyone who in the know about Harry's secret. I'm sure they could use some downtime too, the youngest male redhead shrugged. I know I can, mumbled Sirius, then perked up a bit and left the room. Well, that seemed to bring him out of it. Thanks, mate, Harry said, beaming a smile to his friend, only to cringe at the melted chocolate around his mouth and down his chin. Gross, Ron. Seriously, wipe your mouth, he said, picking up the nearest piece of cloth and threw it in his friend's face. The rest of the group laughed at the byplay. Harry, who had always tried to find a way for Ron to stop eating with his mouth full, got a sly grin on his face and said, "You know, Ron, you're never going to get a girlfriend if you don't start using those manners that I know your mum taught you. Birds don't like ill-mannered people. That, and I'd hate to date one that does." "Can you imagine that?" he said as he shuddered at the thought. "Too right," said Fred, clapping his younger brother on the back. "Those hormones will be kicking in soon, if they haven't already, so you'd better get a move on one cleaning up your manners," George added, smirking at Ron. "As a girl, I can say that they are right," Ginny added, grimacing at the chocolate that still lined Ron's mouth. "Really, Ron, Mum taught you better." Was all the younger redhead had to say as he glanced at his female friend, noting the look of disgust on her face. He quickly used the cloth to wipe his face. Then Fred took pity on him and cleansed it with magic. Hermione agreed with the others. It was one of the things that she disliked about the redhead, his lack of table manners. Nothing she or his family did, or said, seemed to stop that. It was beyond frustrating. Perhaps, Harry hit it on the nose, and this would help. "Remus, can you tell us a bit more about the OWL requirements, so we know what to study?" Hermione asked, changing the subject away from the embarrassed boy. "Well, if rumor is right and you get Umbitch, then you will need to self-study. Even if it is for only a week or so," the werewolf said, grinning to himself. "So, I would recommend reading the books you got today." He shrugged, like it was obvious. "There are a few in the school library that will give you extra insight. I'll write up a list tonight." "That would be wonderful," the bushy-haired girl said, beaming at her ex-professor. "We can also use that room Dobby told us about. That way even if Tonks gets rid of the toad, then we can still have somewhere to practice." "Wouldn't want the junior Death Eaters to know we're practicing," Ron said, finally swallowing before he talked. "That's a marvelous idea," Hermione said, grinning at her friend. It fit nicely with her plan anyway. Even if Harry was staying here, she could still help her fellow year mates. This was one of the most important year for them, and with the shoddy instructors they had, bar Remus, and if she was reluctant to admit, the false Moody, they would need all the help they can get. All she had to do was make so those forementioned JR Death Eaters didn't crash the party. Something she was going to have to think hard on. "Yeah, it is," Harry agreed, glad they would have somewhere to do what they needed. "Okay, so, you lot, go upstairs and get your stuff put away, come back down and we'll have a nice dinner." "Sorry Ron, no party. Fidelio's, remember," Sirius said, coming back to the room. "I did invite your parents, but Molly started in on me the moment I flew, so you guys are to go see her after dinner, all right?" The Weasley children all agreed that would be proper. "Right, I forgot about that spell," the glum boy said, chugging down the rest of his cup and wiping his mouth. If what Harry and the others said was true, he would have to watch his P's and Q's. It wasn't like he didn't know them, he just never really cared before. But the birds would want him to at least be neat. Well, he could do that. Probably. He hoped. No, he had a strong will. He was a Gryffindor after all. They all went upstairs and put their things away. A few washed up and changed into something more casual. Trooping back down, they gathered for dinner. Tonks showed up a bit later and told them that no one was in trouble for the Dementors. The final record was that they went rogue. She did say that Bones was going to be keeping a closer watch on the request that needed to be filled out to even think of recruiting the demons. While slightly good news, the kids were still pissed off that someone was getting away with today's fiasco. No one had a clue as to why they were there, but Tonks figured it was Umbitch trying to get Harry in trouble. Since she had Harry's glass frames, with plain glass, they all thought that maybe there was a tracking charm on them. That said, Tonks and Remus fussed over said frames, and sure enough there were 3 tracking spells. This caused a lot of cussing. Sirius was the most pissed, berating himself for not checking in the first place. The strange thing was, he had no clue how or when it had been applied. He had gone over all Harry's stuff when he showed up. Was it when they were in the ministry? Possible. Now he felt like a right idiot for now checking as soon as they came home. Dinner that night was a boisterous affair. They all had a great time over some beef Wellington with the fixings, and a large chocolate cake for afters. The Weasley kids all went home for a few hours to see if their parents would be meeting them at the station, or did they want them to just float over. It turned out that Molly had already packed lunches and was only waiting for them to recognize her as their mother again. They kids were unsure how to feel about that. They loved their mum, no doubt, but to lay the guilt on them for staying safe, when it was their dad's idea, well, that just rubbed them wrong. Still, they gave her hugs and told her they loved her. Then accepted the offer that they all meet at the station in the morning. The next morning was an orchestrated chaos. Everyone had their trunks packed, but they all seemed to forget something, mostly pets. Ginny and the twins sat on their trunks while they waited for Ron and Hermione to say goodbye to Harry. A few tearful minutes later everyone but Harry and Sirius were gone. The other adults accompanying the teens. "Are you 100% sure this is what you want?" Sirius asked before it was too late for Harry to change his mind. "It is," the teen said with a firm nod. "Okay, well, let's get back to work," his brother said, putting a hand on the other boy's shoulder and steering him to the dungeon where they practiced. Harry looked at the cold flue and then shook his head and let himself be led away. HP. The train ride was quiet. The group were sequestered in a compartment with Neville and Luna, who everyone but Tonks and Hermione knew. They talked of casual things, before the train left the station. Malfoy made his yearly foray into the Potter compartment, but Tonks' quick wit soon and a confused blonde almost running for the hills. Ginny told the girl quietly that what she had done was not a Harry thing. Tonks thanked her and settled in to do a bit of meditation to get in character. She made sure to put a brooding mask on, making it seem more like Harry. Several boring hours later they were at Hogwarts. Every Gryffindor was sitting at their table waiting for the feast to start. Ron was even keeping quiet and not whining about the sorting going slow. When the food appeared, they all had their fill, and Dumbledore stood to make a speech just as the pudding disappeared. When he introduced the Dada professor, he was interrupted by an ugly woman dressed in pink. The group paid attention. This was one of the reasons that Tonks was here, to make sure that this woman didn't hurt anyone. The speech the toad gave was downright disgusting. Tonks, Ginny, and Hermione, probably others as well, bristled at the blatant propaganda and made note to find out how to stop this woman. If Tonks couldn't get her out of the castle soon, Hermione's study group would have to be formed as soon as possible. Not that she wasn't planning on it anyway, but the damage might have to be mitigated right away. McGonagall announced the prefects, which for Gryffindor 5th years were Hermione and Neville, much to the shock of everyone. Tonks was glad, but Ron was miffed. Until the deputy headmistress announced the Quidditch captains, who in this case was Katie. Ron was just glad it wasn't Harry. There was a bit of an ordeal before the Gryffindor 5th year boys went to bed. Tonks pulled off a Harry impersonation quite well. Self-righteous anger was easy to do. Especially, when she agreed with the boy who lived about how their society treated him. She could see now that Harry had the right of it. Good thing he wasn't coming back to this school. She figured that she'd tell them to sod off far sooner than Harry had. Ron was a lot of help, in that he threatened the Finnegan boy and stood up for his best mate. It could have been a lot worse, she supposed. On the way to the Great Hall for breakfast, Harry was stopped many times by people telling him they believed him. There were quite a few Hufflepuffs that thanked him for the article. She noted though they were pleasant, they didn't apologize for their treatment the times they weren't as pleasant. One more check mark for Harry never to return. The schedules were handed out at breakfast and all the 5th years groaned. It was a nightmare of a day. All the worst classes were at the start of the week. Snape, Trelawney, Binns, and Umbridge. Only Hermione was exempt from divination. For some reason all the 5th year Gryffindors took that class. The females of that year actually enjoyed it. Think of it this way, Tonks said, putting the parchment in her history book, and looking at Harry's friends, you'll get the worst out of the way sooner. She shrugged and finished her eggs. I guess that's one way to put it, Hermione agreed, drinking the last of her pumpkin juice. Still, Ron countered, it's going to be a bloody nightmare. He slammed his head on the table and groaned. A few others looked like they wanted to do the same. Classes were going okay, though Tonks made note of how awful Snape treated the students. Sure, she had had the man, but she could see the difference on how he treated Hufflepuffs to Gryffindors. It was outright abuse, and she had no clue why the man still held his station. She was going to tell Bones what was going on. If the Ministry was going to interfere, then they bloody well should do it right. After 3 grueling, not to mention boring, classes, it was time for Dada. They all filed in and took the seats they usually did. The pink woman was at the front of the class, wearing a saccharine smile. Not one single person believed she was as benevolent as she was trying to portray. Still, they kept quiet and looked to the front. When the bell rang and the door closed, Umbridge started her speech. Hermione took exception to the curriculum and called the woman out on it. An argument soon began and for some reason only Harry was given detention. Not at all on purpose, no. Detention, with me, tonight, at 7, Potter, Umbridge said with a vindictive smile on her face. Tonks countered that smile with a black family crazy smile trademark, which looked worse on Harry's face. Perfect, she purred and left the room. Umbridge felt a cold chill go down her back and wondered if she should carry out with her plans. HP. That night, after dinner but before Harry's detention, Tonks and the twins did the spell to find the Horcrux. It was something they wanted to get over with as soon as possible. The sooner it was done, the sooner the war would be over, hopefully. The charm worked and they followed the beam of light, using the Marauder's map, that Harry had lent them. It wasn't far, it was even on the same floor as them. Walking along, making sure no one was around, they soon came to an empty corridor. They located it on the 7th floor, but there was no door to where it was pinging. "This must be the room that Dobby was telling us about," Fred said, waving to the tapestry of the dancing trolls. "You may be right, my uglier twin," George agreed, he too looking at the funny picture of trolls in tutus. "All right," Tonks said, nudging them out of the way. "I pace in front of the wall 3 times, right?" she asked, still looking like Harry. "You have to think about what you need while you're pacing," Fred said, standing on the opposite wall, leaning back with his arms and ankles crossed. His brother in the same pose. "Okay, give me a moment, yeah," she said, thinking hard on what they wanted. "I need the Horcrux," she thought over and over in her mind while pacing. Soon a door appeared and the trio of troublemakers went through, wands drawn and ready. The room was bare, bar a pedestal. On the marble column was a tiara, or maybe a diadem. It was a nice-looking one, though old and tarnished. It was silver, and there were wings of a bird, that they thought was ravens, wrapped around to the back. Words were written between the wings. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." "Isn't that Rowena Ravenclaw's?" George asked, "Have seen in on the statue in the Ravenclaw dorm." There wasn't anywhere in this castle that he and his brother hadn't explored. Well, except this room, and they were going to abuse the hell out of it this year. If Sirius was serious about them needing to have good grades to get their shop, then this room just became the highest priority. "Yeah, looks like it," Fred agreed, peering close at the words on the crown. "Creaker," Tonks called, hoping the elf could get in this room that seemed to be sort of an off-to-the-side dimension. Like it was one step away from reality. A second later the old elf popped in with an iron box. "You is calling Creaker?" he asked, warily eyeing everyone. Sure, his life was better, but he could not overcome a lifetime of prejudice. It had been drilled in his head since birth that people like these 3 before him were less than trash. To Mrs. Black, even he was higher on the totem pole than them. Still, he had been given orders that even thought it, he couldn't express it. "Yeah, I think this is it," Tonks said, still looking at the lost treasure and very glad that it didn't have to be destroyed. "Creaker will be taking it to Master," the elf said, snapping his fingers and floating the diadem into the box. The box snapped shut and the elf sketched a small bow and left. "Well," Tonks said, looking around the now empty room, "that's that, I reckon. If I can get Umbitch to screw up right away, then I can be out of here tonight," she finished smugly. Not that she didn't like posing as Harry, but she wanted to be in on the takedown. "Ah, does Ickle Harrykins want to go home?" Fred teased, leading the disguised woman out of the room. "Stuff it," Tonks said playfully, shoving his hand away. "Have fun torturing the toad," George said as the twins took off running to make the tower before they were missed. Not that they were ever in the dorms before curfew, but this night they wanted an alibi. "You know, just in case." Tonks whistled as she moved toward the Dada room. She was happy that everything got done in record time. She hoped that her boss would let her go home. She wasn't lying when she said that she wanted to help stop the war. With only 2 Horcruxes left, that could be as soon as next week. This put a bounce in her step as she thought up ways to torture the toad, as George put it. She showed up just in time for her detention. She was still wearing that black family crazy smile, and it was still creepier on Harry's face, because she wanted to put the woman off her groove. She took a seat and stared at Umbitch, not blinking once. Her eyes were magnified by the glass in her glasses. They did that so that no one could guess that they were just glass. Potter, the woman started, getting out of her seat and walking towards the boy. Her face was in her superior smile, like Harry was a bug and she was a foot. "Mr. Potter," Tonks said, blinking owlishly. "I beg your pardon," Umbitch said. Her smile dropped, and a look of shock came over her face. She was completely affronted at being talked back to by a teen. One she despised more than other teens. It upset her plans that the little bastard didn't just die via dementors like she wanted. Nor did he use magic to get away. She had no idea how the boy did it, but he didn't break any laws doing it. "My name, to you, is Mr. Potter," the metamorphomagus stated, still smiling. "We are not friends, I would hope we were not enemies, and you are a teacher. Therefore, the professional way to address me in Mr. Potter." If anything, that smile got wider. "Who do you think you are, you little ruffian?" "You have no right to talk to me like that," the teacher said in a high shrilly voice. "Sorry, Madam Umbitch, I know you're new to teaching, I was only trying to help," Tonks said, in the most insincere way possible. "Quit smiling at me, boy," the teacher demanded, sniffing the air like she smelled something bad. "No, I don't think I will," Tonks said with a shrug. "Detention?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Her hands were folded on the desk, for all she looked like a proper schoolboy waiting for his teacher to get on with it. "You will be writing lines," Dolores simpered, handing her a parchment and a black quill. It was her smile that was now unnerving. "Ink?" was the blunt inquiry. "You won't need it," the toad said, still smiling, though it did get creepier. "Oh, well, okay then," Tonks said, and then asked, "What am I to write, and how many?" "I must not tell lies, and until it sinks in," was the answer as the fat woman turned to go to her desk, making it look like she was doing something besides planning torture. "Okay," Tonks said slowly, putting quill to parchment and writing the letter I. She felt the pain in her hand, looked and saw a straight line, trickling with blood. She slammed the quill down, stood from her desk, putting her fist on said desk. She leaned forward and looked the woman in the eye with nothing but hatred showing. "Something wrong, Mr. Potter?" the pink woman asked, with a tone that ice would melt in. As if she was daring the boy to make a big deal of it. With all the things that happened to the child over the summer, she really thought he would sit and take his punishment. She had had second thoughts after Black threatened her, but her mother was long dead now, and he would have a hard time proving it. Though, her brother was out there somewhere. She couldn't find him to shut him up. It's a good thing that she bribed, and threatened, her father to leave the ministry. It would do no good if people knew she was a half-blood. That and the man had been a janitor of all things. After Black had left that day, she and Cornelius had talked, and they came to the conclusion that man was blowing hot air. "You bitch," the disguised female snarled, still wearing Harry's face. To hell with the plan. This was completely out of line and she wasn't going to put herself in pain just so she could draw it out. She had no idea what in Merlin's name this quill was, but the fact that it caused pain and drew blood, which is a major taboo, was enough for her to arrest the woman. Speaking of which, Tonks took the parchment and burned it right in front of the woman. There was no way in hell that she was going to leave her blood on anything. I beg your pardon, Umbridge said, standing up to glare at the child. Then she started giggling. It was disturbing. She figured that she had the brat right where she wanted. He was about to attack a teacher. That was reason for expulsion. You planned on torturing me? You unmitigated bitch, Tonks snarled, putting the quill in her robe pocket and pulling her wand. You, Dolores Umbridge, are under arrest, she said, pointing her wand at the flabbergasted woman. You can't arrest me, boy. You're not an Auror, she said, raising her wand to the teen in front of her. This was not going as planned. He was supposed to just sit and do what she told him to. She held the higher ground here. She had power over him. He was a student, she was a professor. Weren't they supposed to sit and take it? Think again, Tonks said, and fired a spell at the despicable woman. Umbridge didn't even have time to point her wand correctly before she fell face first on her desk. The loud crack that sounded when her head hit, just made Tonks smile. The trickle of blood was nice too. Tonks lifted the fat woman up in the air, settled her into the chair behind her, and wrapped her up in rope. She then went to the woman's office and flued her boss at home. Amelia said that she would be up late for the next few weeks, waiting for Tonks to call her. If she hadn't heard from her by then, she would come and see what the hold-up was. Madam Bones, Tonks called when the flu connected. Tonks, the monocled woman asked, turning in her chair to see. Already? You've only been there a day. What can I say, Harry is good at getting in trouble, Tonks said, waving her boss through. I expect Dumbledore will be here any minute. I'm sure he has the flows monitored, she added, taking her head out of the fire. Amelia stepped through and the two women went to the classroom. Umbridge was just starting to wake, since Tonks didn't hit her with a powerful spell. Amelia, I want that boy arrested, she shrieked, wiggling in her ropes. Do you see what he has done to me? You're going to pay for this, Potter. Tonks just ignored the woman and pulled out the quill. She was still wearing Harry's face and still trying to act accordingly. If Dumbledore did show up, they didn't want him to know that she wasn't Harry. It would make the man more relaxed if he thought that he could sway Harry to come back to his way of thinking. They didn't think they could arrest him, but if he slipped, which was unlikely, they could use it against him. She wanted me to write with this, she informed her boss, handing the quill over and showing the red mark on the back of her hand. It draws blood as it writes, she added, glaring at Umbridge through her fake glasses. I'd show you the parchment, but I followed protocol, and burned it. Good job, not many would have thought of that, her boss said, giving the metamorphmagus a nod. She then peered closer at the quill. I've heard of these, she said, looking the black quill over and waving her wand over it to diagnose what it was. Really, I didn't receive anything about these, Tonks said, thinking that there would have been a memo to be on the lookout for one. But then again, Umbridge was in Fudge's bunch of brown-nosers, so it might be only those at the top to know. She, for all she was good at her job, was still a rookie. That woman, Bones explained, nodding her head in the tied-up woman's direction, has been rumored to be using this thing on underlings. There was no proof, but now she trailed off, giving Umbridge a nasty smile. He planted it, the desperate woman said, glaring at the still disguised Harry. She would not lie to me, countered Amelia, making Umbridge look at her funny. "Tonks," was all the head of the DMLE said, not taking her eyes off her prisoner. Tonks morphed back into herself and said, "Got you." She morphed quickly back and just sneered. Umbridge shrieked and tried once more to get out of her bonds. It was futile, and Amelia hit her with a stunner. Just then the door opened, and in came Dumbledore. "What, may I ask, is going on here?" the old man said, trying to take in the scene. Harry was standing next to Amelia, who was holding a dark artifact in her hand. His Dada professor was knocked out, while tied up to her chair. "Harry, my boy, whatever is the meaning of all of this?" he inquired, looking over his glasses at the boy. Something seemed off about Harry. Was it because he didn't trust Albus anymore, or was it something else? "She," Harry said, pointing at the tied-up toad, "tried to torture me for detention. Madam Bones told me this summer, that my Dada teacher tried to hurt me this year, like every year before. I was to call her. It was the cover story that they had cooked up when this whole scenario was being planned." "I did not know you were in contact with the head of the DMLE, Dumbledore said, a twinkle in his eye. "Why did you not come to me? You've never helped before, so why would I think you would now?" Harry said, giving a careless shrug. "I mean, every year my Dada professor has tried to do me in. You never stopped it, or Snape, come to think of it. Not to mention the years of abuse via students and professors alike, that you just let play out. So why in all that holy would I come to you?" she finished off, having got her jab in. "I never knew until it was too late to help you, Harry. I tried my best to make sure that you, and all the students in this school, were safe," Dumbledore said, genuinely believing what he was saying. He left the abuse part alone. He knew he was in the wrong there, but he felt that it would make Harry get thicker skin. One should not let the feeling of others affect their actions. He knew Harry was going to be a hero. And if the boy thought he had it bad now, well, time will tell. "Not by my reckoning," the boy said, once again shrugging. "Your past actions have shown me that I cannot trust you, even with telling me the correct time. I am terribly sorry that you no longer trust me, Harry." "What can I do to make it up to you?" the old man asked, sincere in his question. It was like a blow to the gut to him that the boy would had once looked to him like a grandfather, now looked at him with disdain. "Don't interfere," was the casual reply. "This is my school," the headmaster said. "It is imperative that I know what is going on." "And you will," interrupted Amelia, who was waving her wand at the woman tied to the chair. "After my investigation," she finished with a note of finality. "After all, you let her in the castle with implements of torture." "I would never," the aghast man said, putting his hand to heart. "This," the older woman said, holding up the quill, "was invented by her," she pointed to Umbridge, "with no other thought in mind but to torture. It uses blood of the victim. I don't have to tell you that that is a capital offense. She will not be walking away from this." "That's good news," Tonks said, glad to hear that the bitch would die. "Right," Amelia said, with a determined look, knowing that it was going to be a battle to the end. However, she was up for it. "I've been looking for evidence for ages, now that I have it, I'm not going to let you interfere." She stuffed the quill in an evidence bag, sealed it and put it in her charmed pocket. Only she could get in that pocket, and only her death would break the spell. "I will do all I can to help," the headmaster stated, hoping that his offer would make Harry see that he was a good man. "You want to help?" Amelia said, lifting the chair that housed the teacher and making her way back to the office. "Don't," she finished as she made it to the door. "Do you need me any more, Madam Bones?" Harry asked, following to the door, but going no further. "No, go back to your dorm. Don't answer any questions on what went on here." "That means you too, Albus. This is now a criminal investigation. Harry is not to talk about it, at all," the head of the DMLE stated, putting flue powder in the fire and levitating the chair in. "Go on, Harry. I will be with you either tomorrow, or the next day." "No one, you hear? Not even your friends," she leveled Tonks a look. The boy sighed and slouched out of the room. She had been hoping to go home today, but there must be a reason Bones wanted her to stick around for a while. "Amelia," Albus started as he watched Harry leave. "No, Albus, I will talk to you tomorrow," she said, whirling around and entering the fire. "Department of Law Enforcement," she called, and disappeared in green flames. Dumbledore sighed and looked around the now empty classroom. Harry wasn't wrong in that all the defense against the dark arts professors had at one time or another tried to kill the boy. He just hoped whoever replaced Umbitch would not do so. With another sigh he left the room. He had work to do. HP. The first thing Tonks did after reaching the dorms, besides waving away the curious looks, was run up to Harry's bed. She wasn't going to sleep here, but she had to wait until all the curtains were closed before she snuck up to the head boy rooms. She whipped out a mirror and called, "Padfoot." The mirror glowed bright for a moment and then died down. It took a minute or two for the man to answer. "What's up, Harry?" Sirius asked, using his brother's name just in case those not in the know showed up. "You'd better get to the ministry as soon as you can." "I got Umbitch right away. She tried to torture me using a quill that wrote with my blood." "Bones said that is a capital offense, but you know Fudge, and probably Malfoy, are going to try and stop it," she said in a rush, throwing up a silencing charm. Which she knew she should have done at the start, but had forgotten in her rush. "What? Already? Damn, girl, you work fast," the flabbergasted man said, though his smile was huge. "Damn right, I do," she said with an impish grin. "Get going," she added and disconnected. Now that that was out of the way, she made her way downstairs to join her friends. Well, Harry's friends, but they had been working together all summer, and she was close to them as well. She reached the group of people by the fire and was amused to see the Weasleys were all regaling their dorm mates with tales of the movies they saw all summer. The twins were over at the other side of the common room, doing the same with upperclassmen. There was a great deal of denial shouting, along with just as much laughter. As one group or another tried to get their voices heard. While prejudice was not ramped in the Gryffindor dorms, there was still a huge divide between Muggles and Magicals. So those that had never seen or heard of a movie, were debating with those that had. At the younger years side of the room, many of the Muggle-born and half-bloods were smiling indulgently at Ron's and Ginny's enthusiasm. They never thought to take their pure-blood friends to see movies. But if this was the result, maybe their summers just got busier. It would go a long way to helping those not in the know understand half the stuff that came out of the mouths of those who did. that divide would get smaller. Now if only the Muggleborn could learn of more of this culture. A debate for another time. "What's up, Harry?" Ginny asked, wondering why the boy was here so fast. "Detention should last much longer than this." "I can't talk about it, but, needless to say, there will be a new Dada professor tomorrow. Or the class will be cancelled," she said with a shrug. There was a lot to impressed whistling, along with some cheering, at that statement. The debate shelved for another time, while the Gryffindors celebrated the loss of the toad. No one liked the bitch. Tonks just smiled and preened a bit at the attention. She felt good after putting that toad in her place. It was good attention, for now. If she learned anything this summer, while view Harry's memories, it was that crowds can turn in an instant. HP. Meanwhile, at Grimmauld Place, Sirius was getting ready to head to the ministry. He had already called those who needed to know. He even recruited the help of Madame Longbottom since she was on the school board. They were all on standby, waiting to see if they needed to storm the ministry. Since he took up his seat, it had been one political game after another, but with her help. She and Sirius had cleared all the bad rubbish off said board and were now working with those that weren't under either Fudge's, Malfoy's or Dumbledore's influence. It was a breath of fresh air. Next week the board was going to go over the current curriculum and overhaul it. Moody had been right, there were no classes that taught wizarding customs or rituals. All the wizarding holidays had been erased from the school. Sure, there was a magical theory class, for first years only, but it was so incorrect that it made Sirius cringe. Pushing it aside, not that he wasn't going to use this faux pas as an excuse to bury both Fudge and Dumbledore, but he needed to get going. Harry was in a daze. His eyes were staring blankly at a spot on the wall. He was amazed and confused that Tonks had done what he didn't think could. She stood up too, and took down a teacher. Something he had been dreaming of doing since he met Snape. Well, he did stand up to the greasy git now and then, but it never got him anywhere but detention. He learned after the first few times, that it was futile to argue. Then again, Tonks was an adult. Maybe she possessed a demeanor that he didn't have. She was a trained orator, so maybe that was it. He didn't know, but he felt all his past efforts to do the same as she did in one day were lame in hindsight. He knew he had an anger problem, and Andy had been working with him on that. His occlumency was better, and it did help a lot. But, he was still prone to jumping first and thinking second. Still, even with all the training the Tonkses and his brother had given him over the months, he had to wonder if he would have stopped Umbitch from torturing him. Or if he would have just sat there and did the lines. It was a major blow to his confidence that the answer didn't come right away. He was extremely glad that he had at least made the right decision to not go back to Hogwarts. Even when Tonks left, he was staying here. McGonagall knew this, she wasn't happy, but he wasn't overjoyed with her past performance either. So, she could suck it. All right, Harry, I'm off to see that justice is served. Why don't you finish that book Remus gave to you, and then head off to bed, Sirius said, going to the fireplace and throwing in the powder. Harry said, then he shook his head to clear the mental debate he had going. All right, good luck, he finally said, then turning his attention back to the Dada book in front of him, he tried to concentrate on reading. Sirius cut him a searching look, before he stepped into the flames. He could see that this was a blow to Harry, and he told himself that he would have a nice chat with the boy as soon as he got back. He sent Harry a reassuring look and flew away. Amelia had given their group permission, after a vow not to abuse it, to fly to her office. So, he did. When he stepped out and brushed the small bit of ash off his shoulder, making a mental note to get the house elves to clean it, he nodded to Bones. "Amelia," he said regally, playing the part of Lord for now. "Black," she said back, also nodding. She then waved for him to sit and they waited. Amelia knew that the ministry was not secure, there would be no talks of clandestine meetings while in the building riddled with spies. It didn't take long before a portly man wearing a green bowler hat showed up. He stormed through the door, marched right up to the desk, put his fat fist on it and leaned over to get in the face of his head of the DMLE. She simply smiled at him and pushed his forehead until he was a good arm's length away. "Amelia, what is the meaning of arresting my undersecretary?" Fudge all but bellowed, puffing up like a blowfish. "Fudge," Black said menacingly, "shut it and sit." The coward jumped, not having seen the man, and did just that. While he might have sway over Bones, he was terrified of Black. "Your undersecretary was caught using a quill that drew blood. That is a capital offense. She not only tried to get blood out of the heir to the Black family, but he is a minor." "If I could kill her twice, I would," Amelia said, without an ounce of trepidation. She knew she had the upper hand here. "And if you think for a moment you can hide her behind pure-blood laws, you are sadly mistaken," Sirius said, poised as a lord should be. "Madam Umbitch is a pure-blood," Fudge sputtered out. He knew Amelia had tried to lie about the woman's blood status before, but he had asked Dolores, and she assured her that she was indeed a pure-blood. Sirius smirked. He felt a little bad about not warning Umbitch's mother, but he couldn't find her. However, when he did comb London's papers and found that that evil woman had killed her mother, well, he couldn't save the poor woman, but he did get the brother to run. But not before he had cajoled the man into getting the police report, and Umbitch's real birth certificate, which he was currently pulling out of his pocket. He didn't say anything, just handed them to Amelia, who took them and looked them over. She smiled and handed them to Fudge. He took them, glanced at the parents' names, paled considerably and sputtered. He didn't say anything, instead he rose, gentle put the papers down and ran from the room. "You won't find her," Amelia shouted after the fleeing man, making his falter for a moment, then resume his running. "As much as I hate the prejudice, it works here," Black said, wearing his family's smile. "Please, don't smile like that. You remind me of your late cousin," Bones said, though she too was smiling. "Fine," the dogman pouted. "Where did you hide her?" he asked instead. "I'm not telling. Only I and one other person knows where she is. All I will tell you is that you have nothing to worry about, that woman is going down," the head of the DMLE said, picking up the papers that Sirius gave her and giving them a once-over. "Good," was all Sirius said, straightening a non-existent wrinkle in his robes. "You go home, and I'll get the Veritaserum, and get all I can from her. If Fudge is smart, he's running for the hills," Bones said, shuffling the parchment and papers on her desk. She needed to have all her ducks in a row for this. There was a way to kill the woman twice. Once kissed, twice the veil. I hope he's just stupid enough not to warn Malfoy. We needed that man where he is. Of course, even if he is warned, he probably won't run. The Dork Lord won't let him. Probably even torture him if he suggests it. Voldy doesn't like cowards. However, if he does get a warning, he might beef up security. Maybe we should set our sights on raiding tomorrow, he added thoughtfully, rubbing his goatee. No, I want Tonks in the school for at least another week. If I have it my way, then Snape will disappear into my cells too, Bones said, closing the folder she had been organizing. You know he did warn Moody about Harry's you-know-what, Sirius reluctantly said. I know, but I want all he has to tell me about both sides of. Well, you know, she said, gathering everything she needed and stood. You go home, and tell everyone who needs to know, that Umbridge's hours are numbered. There won't even need to be a trial, but I'll call an emergency meeting. We'll get it done tonight, she finished as she made her way to the door. Got it, was all Sirius said as he fled away. When he stepped into his house, he noted that Harry hadn't moved the entire time he was gone. Sighing, he sat across from his brother and took the book he wasn't reading away. He closed it and set it aside. Want to talk about it? He asked the younger boy. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I get that Tonks is older and smarter than me, and that she's received training that I haven't, but I feel like everything I've done in the past is just. I don't know, stupid, Harry said, putting his head on his folded arms. Sirius tapped the down head. When Harry looked up, he smiled. It's all part of growing up. Don't you think I didn't do some stupid shite when I was younger? Merlin, the stuff we pulled at school would have gotten us locked up, if Dumbledore weren't so prejudiced against Slytherin. I mean, for all the man talks about equality, he really is blind to his own faults, the dogman said, trying to cheer the boy up. I know, it was the same for me. But at least you didn't have a more prejudiced teacher to counteract all of Dumbledore's. I mean, Snape would let his house get away with murder, probably try to blame the victim, if it were self-defense, Harry said, both sad and angry. Oh, don't rule out or Slughorn, the man was a genius at potions, but he was such a collector of people, that he let those he thought could further his goals get away with a ton of shite. His brother countered. I know he taught Riddle, and that he told the boy more about the dark arts than Dada ever did. Moody told me that Riddle was one of Sluggy's pet projects. Remember, Moody went to school with our Dork Lord. He's been going over his memories of that time, and there have been quite a few insightful things. Really, like what? Harry asked, his interest perked. Nothing you haven't already found out on your own, or that we don't already know, the other man answered with a shrug. That he's a half-blood, that he's was Slytherin's heir, that he turned to the dark arts. Though there was a bit about how he may have obtained some of the things he used to Horcruxes. But that's all water out of the cauldron. The information is of little to no use, Sirius said, waving his hand like it wasn't a big deal. Oh, was the disappointed rejoinder. I was hoping for something I could use, you know, to taunt, or something. You know, to stall, or something, Harry said, thinking about all he knows about the evil man. You could still use it all, the man is a powder keg ready to blow. The angrier you get him, the better. People mess up when they are angry. Which is why me and Andy are trying to get yours under control, his brother said, reaching over and ruffling his hair. Yeah, I've been mulling that over in my head since you left. I know Tonks got to do what she did, because she doesn't jump ahead like I do, Harry said sullenly. Don't worry too much, you are getting much better, Sirius said, standing from the table and jerking his head to the door. Come on, we'll spar for an hour or so, that'll get your mind off stuff, he suggested, making Harry smile and get up too. Yeah, that might be just what I need, Harry said, following the other man to the training room. What's going to happen to Umbitch? He asked as he all but skipped down the stairs. That bitch is going to burn, Sirius said, then laughed manically. Good, Harry said, thoughtfully. While he didn't know the woman, rumor, and what happened tonight, showed that she was the one in the ministry trying to do him in. Ron was going to be a nightmare when he found out that he had been right. It wasn't often he got one over Hermione. With that thought he shrugged and felt okay about that. For once, Ron could be the hero. HP. Harry went to bed feeling a lot better. He was glad that he had Sirius in his life. The man was Merlin sent and made a great big brother. It was with a clear mind that he dreamed of the future. Sirius, unfortunately, could not retire for the evening. He had to get back to ministry to sit his and Harry's seats. The trial would probably be short and sweet, since Umbitch could not use the pure blood laws to protect herself. It was karma really. If the woman hadn't pushed Fudge so hard in passing all those laws that protected the elite, then she would have stood a better chance of defending herself. However, she was the one to push that all laws that labeled non-pure bloods and creatures, or those with creature blood, to be treated as lesser people. Sucks to be her, Sirius thought as they listened to the woman spill all her secrets. The plethora of sins that came out of that woman's mouth was enough for everyone in the room, be they pure blood or not, to go green. Since most of the Death Eaters that held seats were in hiding, it was easy to see that no one was swayed by her. Fudge was noticeably absent, and that was a relief. If Sirius knew the man at all, he would have blustered until he was put down, or fired. Well, more like voted out, but still. The trial was as quick as he had thought it would be. There wasn't even a need to debate. The woman was guilty of so many crimes that she was kissed and pushed through the veil. The conclusion of the questioning led to a lot of arrest and arrest warrants. It was a tired man that fell into bed that night, but a satisfied one. He couldn't wait for the paper tomorrow. HP. Tonks snuck back into the fifth-year boys' dorm at 6 in the morning. Having already showered and changed in the ensuite of the head boy's room, she just had to wait until at least one boy woke up and gave her an alibi. Not that she was doing anything illegal, but she didn't want Dumbledore to catch on. She closed the curtains and waited for Ron to tell her that it was all clear. The boys didn't get up for another hour, which she used to study a bit. She wasn't long out of Hogwarts, but she didn't want to appear better than Harry usually did. So, she read to see how much she would have to dumb herself down. Soon the boys started stirring and Ron gave the all clear about 10 minutes later. They all trooped down to the common room where they met up with Hermione. So, do you think that what you couldn't tell us will be in the paper this morning? Hermione asked, tucking the book she had been reading away and following the boys out of the common room. Probably, Tonks said with a shrug. I mean, I can tell you that Bones. Madam, Bones, Hermione chastised, only to be ignored. Was here, the metamorph said, leading the way to the Great Hall. The twins sidled up to her and tried to get more of a picture on what happened. They knew that she had done something and were a bit cuffed that she wasn't spilling. Soon they were all sitting in the great hall eating breakfast and gossiping. There was wide speculation when it was noted that the pink toad was absent. Everyone who had ever been around Harry in any way was shooting glances at him. They all knew that if there was something happening in Hogwarts, that Harry was more than likely the one in the middle. Tonks was about to stand up and declare victory over the toad, when a parliament of owls flew in carrying a copy of the Daily Prophet. The headlines read, "Umbitch found guilty, Fudge disappears." The article that followed said that she had been accused of black magic. The quill that she had used was shown to the Wizengamot and declared a banned item. It went on to tell how the Wizengamot had come to a verdict so fast, that it beat any verdict on record. There were plenty of comments on how the woman was universally hated at the ministry. The only person who tolerated the undersecretary was Fudge. And they were 78% positive that it was because she was blackmailing him. Most of the crimes that Fudge was accused of piggybacked Umbridge's own crimes. They were all listed in chronological order. The bribes he took, who he took them from, and why they were given in the first place. That put the Neasels among the pigeons. Now there were people, like the Malfoys, who were persona non grata at the ministry. Bones was noted to say that if these people of interest did show, they would be questioned thoroughly. Pure blood or not. The whole Wizengamot agreed, after seeing that the laws were pushed due to bribery, that for this everyone would be held accountable. Well, after Bones arrested quite a few of the men and women there, for the same crimes as Fudge and Umbridge, a committee was set up to go over the laws from the last 6 years. The time Fudge was in office. At the moment, there was no Minster, and the article said that they had picked the eldest Wizengamot member, a Lord Hartstein, to hold the spot until the next election. They wanted to appoint Madame Marchbanks, but she was not willing. Upon reading this, there were cheers heard all over the hall. The teachers looked on with disapproval. Sure, they were glad the toad was gone, but children should not celebrate the death of another human. McGonagall looked over the student body and noted that not everyone was cheering, only those that had family in the ministry. She figured that they must have heard about the vile woman from home. Still, death was not a good cause to celebrate. Unless it was you-know-whose. "Harry," Hermione hissed, "don't, please. It's just not right." She was very uncomfortable with celebrating a death. "I know, but I just can't help it." "I mean, she was going to torture me," Harry said, settling down and giving his friend a grin. "Thanks for asking and not demanding," he added, putting a comforting hand on her arm. "You're welcome," the bushy-haired girl said, her face still sober. "Look at the headmaster and Snape," Ron said, leaning over the table so he could be heard without shouting. "Damn, I haven't seen anyone's face that pale since I first met Malfoy the Younger," Tonks said, looking over at the Slytherin table and seeing said boy go just as pale as Snape. She then turned to look at Dumbledore. The old man did not look happy, and she knew it was because he never condoned the killing of people. In his eyes all were worthy of redemption. Someone really needed to tell that man he was not God. Or even Merlin. She paused at that thought, and really looked at what she knew about Dumbledore. If you lined up what he had done for the last 90 or so years, it really didn't add up to much. So why did people believe that he was the second coming of Merlin? Then she shrugged, it really didn't matter. She heard some of the comments directed at Harry, and smirked. As she listened, she started to eat her breakfast. The article didn't mention Harry by name, only that a minor was the one who caught her. So, of course, anyone who had been in the school for more than a year, knew it was all Harry's fault. Now all she had to do was get Snape. If what she had heard about the man was true, that should be easy. While Harry was just learning to protect his mind, though from what Sirius told her, Harry had the best shields she had ever heard of. Anyway, she also had good shields, so the first time that man even schemed her mind, he was going down. HP. Meanwhile, Amelia was at Grimmauld Place talking to Sirius. Harry was with Remus doing his own schoolwork. He planned on passing as many owls as possible, and Remus was a great teacher. I thought about what you said, Bones started, sipping the tea that was offered. I think you're right. We need to move as soon as possible. I have Kingsley and Moody standing by. We're just waiting on word of the Horcruxes. Once they are gathered, then we'll move, she finished, setting her cup down. All right, you'll be happy to know that the twins and Tonks found the last one, bar the snake. If we're right on that. I know that I'll have to pay special attention to that reptile, Sirius said, standing and putting the empty cups in the sink. That's good to know, was all Amelia said, though her thoughts were going wild. Yeah, I'll contact Bill when you leave, and we'll set it up. What I want to do is, have Harry here to kill the Horcruxes, while we take out the rest of the dark idiots. I know I want a piece of both Malfoy and Riddle, Sirius said, settling back down at the table. He lifted his eyebrow questioningly, as if to ask if she could work with that. Sounds like a plan I can get behind. Does he already know the spell? She asked, still planning how to pull off this attack. Yeah, Bill and Remus have been teaching it to him all summer. He wants to go and fight, but he is just a kid. And as much as I hate to agree with Molly, kids have no need to fight in wars, the dogman sighed, running a hand down his face. He just knew that he was going to have to fight with Harry about this, again. But he was going to stand firm. Harry would be doing his part by destroying the rest of Tom's soul. Even that was too much for Sirius to feel comfortable with, but he compromised. Tonks was supposed to be here with Harry, but if she were staying in the school, he'd have to ask Auntie. While his cousin didn't want to be involved with the fighting, he was sure she would stand by Harry to see the deed done. Why don't you call a meeting with all those in the know, while I get some of my best people to be there? After all, being a Dark Lord is a crime, and so is siding with one. We will be making many arrests that day, Amelia said with a satisfied smirk. Does that mean we need to use stunners? Sirius asked, not sure how he felt about that. If they fire killing spells, then by all means, retaliate in kind. I will make sure that no one gets arrested for defending themselves. However, and I can't stress this enough, if anyone is caught torturing someone, they will face justice. There is no cause for that, at all, she said firmly. Don't worry, even if Snape is found there, or Pettigrew, I won't. I'll make sure the others know as well, he said almost wistfully, like he had just been denied a dream. Oh, and I have a surprise for everyone. Thought I'd let you know that I've found a way to make tonight a lot easier, he added, a shite-eating grin on his face. You're not going to tell me, Are you? She asked with a sigh. Nope, but I will reiterate that it will go a long way in getting us through the wards, he answered, his smile getting wider. Fine, she huffed, getting up from the table. Keep your secrets, she finished as she reached the floor. I will, ta, was all Sirius said, also standing to get his part started. Ft, she said, calling out to the ministry and disappearing in the green flames. Sirius just shrugged and left. He figured he'd bother Harry for a minute, then get started on what needed done before tonight. As it was, he was going to have to visit a few people. So, yeah, a minute or two with his little brother was what he needed to get started on the stressful things with a calmer disposition. Later that day, Sirius and all those in the know were sitting in the kitchen of Grimmauld Place. Harry was sitting to his left, while Amelia was sitting to his right. The mirror was in the middle of the table, suspended with a hovering charm. Tonk's normal face could be seen. Okay, we are happy to report that the twins and Tonks found the last Horcrux, barring the snake. So, it's just a matter of bringing down those wards, Sirius said, giving everyone the smile. His family was famous, or infamous, for. I don't like that look, Padfoot, Remus said, leaning away from his friend, so he didn't get caught in the crossfire of whatever scheme the man had up his sleeve. What? This look? Sirius said, trying to look innocent. Yes, said half the table. Fine, spoil my fun, the poor picked-on man said with a pout. It wasn't there long, as the Black family crazy smile trademark made its debut. I found something in Regulus' room, he said, holding up a black disc. Creaker had informed me not long ago, that there were things in that room that my little brother was hiding. He said that most of it was to keep it out of the hands of old Voldy. There were a few other things he hid from my dear old mum, he added, his smile not waning in the least. Oh, what is it? Harry asked, leaning forward a bit to look at the disc. This, my dear brother, is a ward scrambler, the older man said, holding it out for everyone to see. What? Was the exclamations around the table, bar Harry and Tonks. Yup, the dogman said. As far as I know, there are only 3 in the whole world. I have no idea how Reggie got a hold of one, though I would bet half my vault that it was hidden in this house somewhere, he added, flipping the disc like a coin. Knowing my dearly departed parents, it would not surprise me if they used this for some of the darker things my family is infamous for, he added, putting the disc on the table. How do you know it works? Tonks asked via the mirror. I went to visit the Dursleys, was the casual answer. I'm not going to have to arrest you, am I? Amelia asked, not really bothered it. Nay, there was no one there, but there were enough of the blood wards that I could test this out. Harry, you will be happy to know that the vaulted wards around the Dursleys' house are no more, the older man said, grinning like no tomorrow. Well, I wasn't planning on returning there anyway. Where were the Dursleys, I wonder, the boy who lived said, thinking hard on what might have happened to them. Don't know, his brother answered. For all I know, they were simply out to dinner. I mean, does it really matter? Your shot of them, Sirius finished, then looked around the table. Bill, catch, he said, tossing the disc to the curse breaker. You know, I have been in this business a long time, and I would have given my first year's pay to have one to these, the redhead said, examining the disc to see if it was something that could be copied. It would have cost you first 3 years' pay, Moody said, looking over the man's shoulder to see what's what. We really don't have time to debate all this, Bones stepped in. We need to get things set up so we can get this done fast. Harry, do you know the spell to clear the Horcruxes we have here? The older woman asked, turning to the boy who didn't want to be left behind. She could see that much from the look on his face. Yeah, the teen said, folding his arms and slouching in his seat. Good, I want you to wait for my patroness. When it shows, you will know the snake is dead. Do the spell as quickly as you can, and we can end this war before it starts, she said in a no-nonsense voice, quite used to despondent people. For all Aurors were grown people, they tended to pout quite a bit. Fine, Harry huffed, knowing that even if he wanted to sit under the cloak, like they had planned from the start, he couldn't. Sirius had talked it over with him many times, and he just wasn't prepared to fight a room full of Death Eaters, and challenge Voldemort. As it was, the prophecy, whatever it said, would probably come to pass when he killed the Horcruxes. Good, and thank you, Bones said with a curt nod. The rest of you know what to do. The only reason we hadn't gone before was because we couldn't plan around the taking down of the wards. Now that Black had found this doodad, we can get those wards down before the Death Eaters can rise from kissing Riddle's robe, she finished, nodding to Bill questioningly. Not a problem, the Cursebreaker said, tucking the disc in his front pocket. Good, then go home, kiss your loved ones, take a shower, spar, whatever helps you relax. We leave at dusk, the head of the DMLE said, getting up to make her way home. I'll stay here and let you know if Snape leaves. I have Dobby keeping tabs on him, Tonks said, nodding in Harry's direction, acknowledging that he had given his elf permission to help her. Not that it was something difficult to do. Even though Snape had warned Moody about the Horcrux, that didn't negate the years of horrible treatment in the Potion Masters class. There would never be any reason that Harry would drop that. Sirius had told him about the man's obsession over his mum, but that was just creepy in his book. He did wonder if it was Snape hanging around his mum when they were kids was what made his aunt too hateful. Who knows, was his final thought on that. Both those people had made his life hell, and he wasn't going to waste any more time thinking about them. Good, Sirius said, standing up and nudging Harry to do the same. We're going to practice that spell, he said, taking Harry's elbow and leading him out of the room. I can walk, you know, Harry said, taking his elbow back. Why are we going to practice that spell? I already know it, the boy complained. We're not, Sirius said, leading him to Reggie's old room. Then, the question was left hanging. You'll see, was all the answer he got. Sirius, Harry whinged. Just kidding. No, I found something else in here, he said, going towards the wall with the bookcase. What? Harry asked, following behind. This, Black said, holding up a book that had a red cover on it. What is it? A Prankster's Guide to Pranking, Sirius said, handing the book over. I left it here when I ran away. I guess Reggie found it and hid it, so my mum didn't burn it, or something, he finished, wandering back to the bed and sitting down. You guys wrote this? Harry asked, thumbing through the first few pages. Yep, it took us most of fourth year, but we got it printed that summer. Only 5 copies, one for each of us, and a master copy. We were going to sell it, but the war started really revving up around then, so it got kinda forgotten. What I want from you, is for you to read it and tell me if it's sellable. Sure, Harry said absently as he continued to read. I'll come get you when it's time, his older brother said as he left the room. Sure, was the vague answer. I think this will work great, Sirius said, smiling to himself as he all but danced down the stairs. Really, great, he said, giving himself a pat on the back for getting his brother's mind off what was going to happen that night. HP. Hermione and Ron were sitting in the common room talking to Tonks. Harry, Hermione said, looking around making sure they were being paid attention to, but casting a silence cone to be sure, if you've done your task, why are you still here, she asked. Hoping that it was something to do with the group she was going to start. Since there was no teacher at this time, it would be imperative to get something started so that everyone wouldn't fall behind. However, Hermione was honest with herself enough to know that she knew more than most, but the last 4 years told her she would be a terrible teacher. Harry leaned over just a bit, not worried about being over here, but making it look like he was keeping secrets, which was a very Harry thing to do. Snape, was all he said. Oh, I thought he was on our side, the bushy-haired girl countered. He might be, or there might be another reason. All we know about the man is that Dumbledore vouches for him. He had done nothing to prove he leans either way. I think, for one, that he plays the devil's advocate, Tonks said, leaning back in her chair with a casualness that Harry rarely pulled off. That boy was just too uptight. How will you find out? Ron asked, hoping that they did catch his most hated teacher. It wasn't so much that Snape was head of Slytherin, it was the man was a right bastard. I'm hoping he does his little mind-reading trick, Tonks said, then got a thoughtful look. Hey, did I give you that book on occlumency, she asked, not realizing that maybe Harry had given to his friends. Oh, yeah, we got that ages ago, Ron said, nodding along with his words. You gave it to us right after you got it? We just didn't want my mum to know. I know she wasn't at the house, but I wouldn't put it past her to find us doing something she wouldn't like. It's a mum thing, I'm sure. Also, the twins finished the book a while ago, so don't worry about them, he added, looking over at his mischievous look-alike brothers. I wasn't, Tonks denied, casting a fleeting look at the twins. I found that book most useful, Hermione said, tapping her finger on the chair with nervous pent-up energy. The things I can do with my mind now would boggle any pureblood that tried to read it, she said a bit smug. I'm glad it worked for you guys. I read it myself and I can tell you it is much easier to do than what they learn at the academy. I had Remus help me a bit, Tonks said, blushing a bit, which made Harry's pale skin stand out. Harry, you might want to tone it back a bit. You're blushing like a girl, Ron said, noticing that they were attracting attention. Oh, right, Tonks said, getting back into character. Hermione dropped the silence cone, and they talked about mundane things until it was time for dinner. They made their way downstairs and sat at their normal table. Tonks was quick to note that Snape jerked as if hit. Then the man got up and went to Dumbledore, then hurried out of the Great Hall. She exchanged looks with Ron and Hermione, then looked back at the headmaster, who was all but staring at her. Cover for me later, yeah. If anyone asks, then tell them I'm off studying somewhere, or, trying to discover the secrets of the school, or something, she said, in a whisper in Hermione's ear. All Hermione did was nod once, then they resumed dinner. HP. Meanwhile outside the wards at Malfoy Manor, was a group of people hoping to end a war. It was dark and clear out, so they were pretty well hidden. There was no moon, which everyone was thankful for. Each had a pair of spelled glasses, or goggles, to see in the dark with. Getting them wasn't a problem, since the DMLE had those on hand. Amelia had brought enough for everyone. They were all sitting outside the outer ward, waiting on Bill to get the scrambler working. Bones, Shacklebolt, and a man named Proudfoot were there to represent the ministry. Amelia didn't trust anyone else. She had been iffy on Kingsley, but the man vowed to keep this night's activity to himself. They all waited in the dark, back to back in triangle formations of 3. Sirius, Alastair, and Remus were covering Bill. They were only the 7 strong, but they had surprise on their side, they hoped. Bill was so focused on what he was doing, that he didn't even note the people around him. He was completely absorbed in his task. The ward scrambler wasn't difficult to use, but it was time-consuming. Every step had to be meticulously done, which was one of the reasons so few were made. Most people wanted in and out in quickly. As it was, this took at least 5 minutes to set up and activate. If you rushed it, the wards would trip, and you'd be noticed. Amelia, Sirius whispered to the woman in charge. "What?" she hissed back, making sure to show that she didn't like that he was making noise. Sometimes she hated working with amateurs. Oh, Sirius had been an Auror back before he went to prison, but it seemed that he had forgotten everything taught to him. "Did you tell Albus?" was the quiet question. "No," was all she said, looking at him puzzled. Why in all that was holy would she even think on telling the headmaster? "Oh, okay, good," Blackside. He didn't really think she had, but it was a tense moment, and he wasn't thinking completely straight. This was the defining moment in keeping Harry out of this war. Last thing he needed was for Albus to come and try to stop them from doing what needed to be done. He hadn't even thought anyone would tell the man until now. He glanced questioningly at everyone else, getting shakes of no in return. "Quiet," hissed Moody, his eyes never leaving the manor in front of them. No one said anything else. "Got it," Bill said quietly as he stood. He brushed his hands onto his trousers, standing and getting his wand out. He joined Amelia's group and made ready. "Go, go, go," Amelia said with urgent quietness, waving her hand in an get moving motion, and rushing everyone forward. Bill was in the lead, while he had taken his time with the outer ward, the inner one was going down in a blaze of glory. They didn't need to be stealthy for that one. Now that the trip ward was gone, Voldy and his Des would think they were further away. Boom! Went the wards. "Go," Amelia shouted, then called to the manor, "Tom Riddle, you and yours are under arrest." She knew it wouldn't help, but one had to obey the law. Especially, if one was the law. A score of men and women in black robes poured out of the house. Most of them didn't have masks, so it was easy to identify them. Narcissa took the lead, having learned of her sister's squibbing, had turned her to her husband's cause. She had always believed in blood purity but was smart enough to know that inbreeding was a thing. So, when she learned of Bella's death, she wanted revenge. Anger drove her forward now, while the others spread out. Most of the Death Eaters were caught flat-footed, seeing that their opposition was so close to the house. All 7 of the attackers sent a barrage of spells to the unsuspecting victims. If you could call those like these people a victim. Not one of the attackers had any sympathy as they mowed down half of Riddle's minions, bar those like Narcissa and Greyback. For someone who had thus far stayed out of the fight, Narcissa was one hell of a fighter. Said woman avoided the first volley, sending deadly curses in return. That was enough for the attackers to go lethal. The Death Eaters were not expecting that. They were too used to the order firing disabling spells. A good half of the defenders were down before they could blink. Most of them won't be getting back up. Two of the Death Eaters had already broken off from the fight and ran back into the house. Amelia let them go, figuring they going to do the futile thing of warning their lord. Like the man didn't already know they were there. As fight raged on, it was clear that Sirius and Amelia's people were winning. Riddle had yet to come out of the house, neither had the two Death Eaters. Which made Sirius concerned, so he whipped out Harry's invisibility cloak and snuck past the fighting. He quietly crept toward where he knew the ballroom was, figuring that old Tom would have set up shop there. The man was pretentious enough. He heard hissing and peeked around the doorway. It was a scene that would have made him laugh any other time. Voldy was arguing with his snake. At least that is what it looked like. That, and it appeared that the man was losing. The snake was coiled up in front of the Dork Lord, only standing high enough to be in Tom's face. It was clear from the expression on Riddle's face that they were fighting. Sirius, instead of laughing, lined up his wand and fired a cutting curse. The curse hit true, and Nagini was dead before old Voldy could react. Sirius fired off a few more shots, then ran to get to an empty room. He quickly took out his mirror and called the house. "Harry, it's done, your turn," was all he said in a hushed whisper. Then he put the mirror away after disconnecting it. Then he laid in wait, while the Dark Lord moved around the house casting a revealing spell in each room he entered. Sirius knew the cloak would hide him, but he needed to wait until the idiot was mortal. So, after Tom left the room he was hiding in, he snuck behind him and followed the frustrated man around the house. Any other time, Sirius would have found this hilarious. Okay, he did think it was too funny, but he had enough control not to laugh. He was going to use the memory for his next patroness. He did wonder where those two Death Eaters went though. He really hoped they weren't calling for backup. HP. Earlier, Harry had been waiting on pins and needles for the OK. His wand was hovering over the items, and his face was so tense, Andy was afraid it would break. The mirror was laying on the table in front of him, just waiting for the signal. If Sirius got the snake, he'd use the mirror. If Amelia did the deed, then she would send a patroness. "Calm down," Andy said softly, putting a hand on his arm. "If you make your arm tired now, you will not be ready when it is time." Harry took a deep breath and lowered his arm. She was right, it was getting tired. "Watcher," came a voice from the doorway. "Tonks, what are you doing here?" "I thought you were keeping an eye on Snape," Harry said, whirling around, almost falling in the process. "He left," she answered with a shrug. "As far as I know, he's with Riddle," she added, going to give her mum a hug. "Since he's probably going to be arrested, I figured I'd help here," she finished, taking a seat next to Harry. "I've got the gang covering for me, just in case I'm wrong." "Oh, okay," Harry said, not sure how he felt about Snape being in the fight. Just because the man warned them about the Horcrux, didn't make him a nice man. For all Harry knew, Snape might have made an oath about making sure Harry survived, or some such rot. "I, for one, am glad you are here," Andy said, getting up and heading towards the door. "I did not like to be here," she said, stopping right before leaving, and turning to them she explained. "When I married your father, I gave up dark magic," she said, nodding to her daughter. "While the spell that Harry is doing isn't dark, per se, it isn't light. It makes me uncomfortable being around those objects as well. I don't know what they are, but they give off an evil feel. So, no, I am glad you're back, Nymphatora, so that I may remove myself." "I get it, Mum," Tonks said. She knew that after the blacks had kicked her mum out, the older woman had sustained on only doing spells necessary for her work and keeping house. It was kinda sad that so much was lost, but even though her mum was now brought back into the family, she still only wanted to be surrounded by light magic. "I don't get it, but it is your choice," Harry said, scratching his head. "Thank you for almost going against your principles." "You are more than welcome, Harry. I would do anything to prevent a war, even bending my morals, if needs must." "Those can be brought back, the dead cannot," Andy said, giving the boy a small smile. Then she nodded her head and left. Harry turned towards Tonks and lifted an eyebrow. "I'll explain another time," she said, shaking her head. "We need to be ready for the signal," she added, moving so that she was next him. "Right," was all he said. They didn't really talk after that, but there were a few words of encouragement from Tonks, here and there. Like "any minute now," or "you can do it, Harry," things like that. Every time Harry got antsy, Tonks would try and soothe him. If she could, she would do the spell, but it was decided that even though they don't know the exact words of the prophecy, they wanted to make sure Harry had a part in Tom's demise. Right when Harry was about to cry out in frustration, Sirius's call came through. The message received, Harry cast the spell on each of the items. One by one a ghostly image of Voldy appeared, screamed, and died. It was almost anticlimactic for Harry and Tonks, but at least now they knew he was mortal. It had taken longer than anticipated because Harry had to use Parcel Tongue on a few, like the locket. "It done," the boy said, slouching in his chair. Tonks did the messenger patroness to give Sirius the go-ahead. "Do you think they are all right?" Harry asked when she was done. He was glad she took that initiative because he was beat. "I'm sure they are. They've been training for this day for weeks now." "Sure, that's not terribly long, but they put their all into it. That, and most of them are veterans to war." "I know all but Kingsley fought in the last one," she answered, trying to be reassuring. She, like Harry, wished she were there as well. It was her job, however, to keep the teen here. For all he too had been training, he was nowhere ready to face a man with decades more experience. "We can spar," Harry offered, knowing that there was no way he was just going to sit and wait for them to return. Sparring would take his mind off things. He had thought about reading the book that Sirius gave him last night, but after about an hour reading it the night before, it didn't really keep him distracted. He didn't let his brother know that though. It had been a nice gesture. HP. The battle was dying down. There were only 2 Death Eaters, and Tommy Boy, left to deal with. Voldy had yet to make an appearance outside the house. Narcissa and Lucius were the only ones still fighting. Lucius was fighting to kill, and his wife copied his moves. They may not be in a love marriage, but both took family very seriously. Therefore, they would win together, or die together. Amelia did always admire that about purebloods. Her family was much the same, having been raised on the same principle. Still, she wasn't going to let their teamwork bring her down if she could help it. She could see by the way the blonde man was fighting that he had spent the last decade or so just playing politics. During the last war Lucius was a man to fear, but now, his wife, who never fought before, was doing better than him. Kingsley was down. He was bleeding badly, but Remus was attending to him, while Bill was keeping them covered. The man, Proudfoot, was also down, but he was just disabled. Moody and Amelia were fighting Narcissa and Lucius. Moody had just blasted Lucius in the leg and quickly tied him up. He nodded to Amelia, who was still fighting Narcissa. Seeing she didn't need his help, he started gathering all the Death Eaters, be they dead or not, and putting them in a group. He then had them sit side by side in a circle, backs facing each other, and made a huge rope to tie them together. HP. Meanwhile, in the manor, Sirius was still sneaking around. Not that those fighting knew that, but they were sure the man would not have left them to fight if he were not busy doing something necessary. At the moment, he was trying to find out what happened to the two Death Eaters that had snuck away. He was peeping around corners, still staying within cursing distance of Tom. Just then three things happened all at once. A patroness flew in, Dumbledore showed up, and Peter in rat form scurried to his master. Sirius was about to throw off the cloak when Dumbledore decided that it was time he talked to Tom. Sirius stayed hidden, watching and waiting for his opening. "Tom, tonight you will pay for your crimes. That is the head of the DMLE out there fighting your men. She will be arresting them shortly. You will soon follow. Give up now, and perhaps she will be lenient on you," the headmaster said, like he was the one who planned the whole thing. The old man had his wand pointed at the noseless man. Riddle raised his wand and sneered. "Dumbledore, how kind of you to present yourself to me. It saves me the trouble of tracking you down." Both men were grandstanding, which they were both well known for. Neither wanted to throw the first curse, since Voldy was known to fear Dumbledore, and Albus was known for giving second, third, or however many chances to the wrong people. The fact that the headmaster thought that this being could be saved let Sirius know that there was something terribly wrong with the old man. Perhaps it was time he retired. Permanently. Sirius scoffed and pulled out his mirror. He activated it on silence mode, which meant that those on the other side could hear it, but they couldn't be heard. Right now, he was hoping Andromeda would be paying attention, and that she would write down what was said, so her husband would have evidence. Little did he know that Tonks was doing just that, after she heard the last sentence from old Voldy. She nodded to Harry to listen in, and they leaned forward to hear everything. The two men were still going back and forth, both saying nothing, while incriminating themselves all the same. "Tell me, Dumbledore, where is your hero? I hear that Harry Potter has turned against you. Not that I blame him, you are an interfering old man who doesn't know how to keep his big nose out of other people's business," Voldy said, glaring at the man who had made his life miserable, for as long as he could remember. "Tom, why do you wish to know?" Albus asked, truly wondering what Voldemort was thinking. Did the man know the full prophecy? He knew that Sirius and Harry had listened to it. Did Voldemort learn it from Harry's head? Was the boy still connected to Tom? Severus had said that he was not, but if Harry had not died, then how was the Horcrux removed? He had a hard time believing that he had been wrong for so many years. That is my business, old man. Once again you are poking your nose in where it doesn't belong, Voldy sneered, watching his sniveling underling cower towards him. Like he'd protect the weakling. Sirius looked to the side and saw Snape lurking in the shadows. That man was very good at staying hidden until he wanted to be seen. If there was one thing he could give the man credit for, it was that Snape was one of the best spies Sirius had ever seen. None of the others, during the last war, had lasted as long as Snivellus had. If nothing else, Sirius was impressed with that. Peter took that moment to fully change. "Master," the mousy man said, finally getting the courage to speak, "we're losing." "What?" Voldemort exclaimed, not fathoming for a moment that his people would lose to a bunch of tree huggers. "They went lethal, Master. They are killing the others." "We were not prepared for that," Peter said, hiding behind his master, without appearing to do so. Spineless man that he was. "That's very unlikely, Peter." "Aurors are not allowed to kill," Albus said, as if he was in control of the others. Severus had said they were fighting back with force, but he knew that the Ministry would never condone deadly force. "Yet, they are," the Ratman said, squeaking more than speaking. "I saw them with my own eyes," he protested further, still hiding behind the man who could care less if he died or not. "A good half of us were dead before we could even fight back." Sirius took the time to get behind Peter, so he would be in the position to take him out the moment he transformed. There was no way he was going to let his old friend escape this time. "If they are fighting out there, why are you in here?" Tom asked, not turning from the old man, but making it sound like a threat, just the same. "I came to protect you," Peter whimpered, unconvincingly. "Leave, Wormtail. Leave now or die by my hand." "You had better be going to help your comrades, or I will find you and you will wish yourself dead," the Dark Lord said, making the coward cringe. Peter transformed and was heading out to do as he was ordered, when suddenly he couldn't move. Then for some unknown reason, he was being dragged across the floor, though no one seemed to notice. Once he reached the person capturing him, it went dark. Sirius tucked the rat in his pocket. He spelled the opening shut, so that there would be no accidental escape. Then he fired a stunning curse at Snape, making the man fall to the ground. Both the men, who were still facing off, looked at the downed man, then back at each other, then thinking they now had a common enemy, they both turned and started casting revealing spells. "Whoever you are, come out now and I will be lenient," Tom said, peering at corners like they would reveal the culprit. "Harry, my boy, how did you get here?" "Last I saw you were at school," Dumbledore said, correctly guessing that the invisibility cloak was at play, but incorrectly guessing who was using it. Sirius remained silent. They had made sure that the cloak could not be seen. Moody had found all the spells on it and removed them, though he was loath to do so. It would now hide from anyone, including Moody, which, as said, the man didn't like but agreed it was necessary. Everyone jumped when there was a large explosion outside the room. The windows lit up like it was morning. Then the light faded. They didn't move from where they were, but they did look towards the wall the sound came from. That was when Sirius took his shot. He fired a piercing curse at Voldy and got him right between the eyes. The Dark Lord dropped, never to get up again. Dumbledore rushed to the man's side, not believing for a moment that he was dead. Unless he knew Harry had done it, then to him, it was not over. Sirius knew it was a cowardly move, but they also knew that if Dumbledore knew who killed the man, then there was a good chance that person would wind up in Azkaban. Well, maybe not, but having stayed at that resort once before, Sirius was not eager to take the chance. As it was, had not the old man been here, he might have faced the Dark Lord in combat. Perhaps it was better that it played out this way instead. As much as he would have liked to duel the now dead man, he wasn't sure he would win. After all, he had spent 12 years in the worst place on Earth. There wasn't much he could have done in there to stay in shape. Not to mention that the Dementors would have never allowed it. Harry, I am so disappointed in you. You know that this is not the end, Albus said, rising from his inspection of Tom. Tom will rise again. You are only putting off the inevitable, the old man droned on. Sirius decided not to engage in talk with the old man. Harry had an alibi, so he wasn't worried about the headmaster trying to make the boy out to be dark, or some such rot. He didn't care what the old man said about him, he had permission to go lethal from Bones. Still, while the old man prattled on, Sirius was making his way towards the door, moving slowly as to not make a sound. He wanted to get to Amelia before Albus did. Speaking of Bones, she and Moody ran into the room right at that moment. They both stopped short at seeing the dead man on the floor. Albus, what in the blazes are you doing here? Moody asked, firing off a spell that wrapped the dead guy in ropes. They weren't going to take any chances until he was thrown through the veil. Severus warned me that a group of people were trying to take down Voldemort. I decided to come and lend a hand, the old man said. Did you kill Riddle? Amelia asked, roping up Snape for good measure. No, I do believe that young Harry is here, Dumbledore said, looking around the room trying to locate the cloak. He didn't understand, he had spelled the cloak to always be visible to him. It was only practicing good responsibility. He couldn't have a child running around the school invisible. If you're looking for Harry, you won't find him here. He is at home where he belongs, Bones said, floating the two tied-up men in front of her, while she made to leave the room. She knew it was serious, but there was no way Dumbledore could prove it. That was the way they had it planned. Whoever got the Dork Lord, would stay out of it. Meanwhile Sirius had left the room and was now running back in it, like he had been outside the whole time. Sorry, I didn't come sooner. I found the rat, and needed to capture him, he said, playing like he was out of breath. Good, hand him over, and he can be tried with Snape, Bones said, nodding to Moody to take over floating the two men. Moody did, while Sirius undid his pocket and handed over the stunned rat. Severus has my dash was all the headmaster said, before he was interrupted. I don't care, Amelia snapped. You are not an Auror, or even a ministry worker anymore. Therefore, you have no say in the matter. I am not the men of old that worship the ground you walk on, Albus Dumbledore. If this man had committed crimes, he must pay for them, she stated firmly, all but snarling in his face. There is nothing you can do to stop that. No man is above the law, not even you. Get that through your head. She sniffed and folded her arms, as if daring the man to say different. Albus pulled himself up to his impressive height, and he looked down his nose at her. I am Albus, he said, before being interrupted again. We don't care, Sirius said this time, looking down his nose at the taller man. You were not part of the planning that went into tonight. You were not invited, and you took no part in the fight. You have already said, it wasn't your spell that killed Voldy, so you can just keep your mouth shut and let us finish what we came here for, he said, before spinning around and stomping out of the room. Much like a teen who was told to keep his music down. Amelia and Alastor followed behind, not giving Dumbledore any more of their time. They had stuff to do tonight, and fighting with Albus was not part of that. The first thing they had to do was throw Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, through the veil. There would be no chance of him recovering from death this time. Not that he could, but it paid to save. Dumbledore stood where they left him, his Machiavellian mind going 1,000 miles a minute. This was not the way it was supposed to end. Harry was the one who was supposed to make the final blow that would end the Dark Lord's reign of terror. Albus had planned it for years. Every step was important. How did it all go wrong? He would never know. HP. Harry was pacing back and forth in front of the door of Grimmauld Place. He was waiting anxiously for the team to return from the battle. The mirror had cut off when Sirius went to the ministry, at Amelia's request. They had taken down every word, and they made sure that all three, that were in the house, had a copy. They didn't want to take any chances of someone, who will not be named, would make the evidence disappear. They also stored with the documents, their memories of listening to the byplay of Albus and Tom. Harry's head was going 1,000 miles a minute, waiting for some news that everything was okay, and everybody was all right. Andy was by his side, also waiting for news, for evidence to make sure everybody was at least alive. Tonks had gone back to Hogwarts, to see if the headmaster said anything. She was sure the old man would pull her aside and question her whereabouts. Good thing she had an excuse. Suddenly the door opened, and Sirius and Remus walked in. Well, Harry blurted out, not even giving them time to remove their cloaks. You know Riddle is dead, what else do you need? Sirius said, teasing him a bit. Come on, Sirius, be serious, Harry said, giving him a cheeky grin. I'm never serious, yet I always am, the dogman laughed. Okay, you two, enough byplay, Andy said, walking towards the kitchen. I want to know what happened after you got to the ministry, she added, going to the stove and putting the kettle on. It was pretty dull, actually. We got there, scared the living crap out of everyone, by floating the Dork Lord through the lobby. Bones made sure that everyone present knew that the man was dead, and not coming back. She claimed that she didn't know who killed him, but was positive that it was not Harry, Remus explained, sitting at the table and resting his head on his folded arms. It had been one hell of a night. Everyone on our team survived, but only just, he added, as an afterthought. That is good to hear, Andy said, taking cups out of the cupboard with her wand. Yeah, Harry agreed. What happened then? He asked, turning back to his brother. We took Voldy down to the Department of Mysteries and were met by the Unspeakables. They showed us to the Veil Room, without us even asking, mind you. Once we got there, Amelia just floated the boy through. It was anticlimactic, the older man sighed. What did you expect to happen? Death to show up and thank you for killing off the man who ran from him? Harry asked, giving his brother a queer look. Maybe, Sirius said, sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. What about Snape? I know you got him, so what happened to him? The teen asked, looking at Remus's head, then back to Sirius. His brother looked just as tired as his wolfy friend, but he seemed more determined to answer Harry's questions. He's locked up for the night. Amelia said she was too tired to play games with him. That and time in the cell will make whatever he's taken, which we are sure he has, time to weaken. There are potions that will counter Veritaserum. Oh, I didn't know that, the boy said, thinking hard on what that would take. Still, Snape was a master of potions. Anything else we should know? Andy asked, bringing a tea service to the table, with lots of sweets to boost their energy, if they could get up enough to actually eat them. Malfoys, the seniors, were the only ones left standing, and Moody got them with a very powerful Lumos, Sirius explained, glad he knew where that light had come from. For a while there he thought the Muggles had dropped a bomb. From what Lily had showed them once, in a book, it looked pretty much like that. Oh, Harry said knowingly. The exploding sound you heard on the mirror was Lucius's wand when he tried to counter curse blindly. His hand will never be the same. Not that it mattered, he's going away for life. So's Narcissa. I was upset to hear that. And now that I know she didn't carry the dark mark, but was planning on it, I booted her out of the family. I don't know what to do about Draco, but that's a problem for another time, Sirius finished, all worn out now. He joined Moony with putting his head down too. Can't Draco live with Pansy? I mean, aren't they betrothed or something? Harry asked, sitting with his tea, not pouring Sirius or Remus any. It looked like they could use a nap. Maybe, we don't know. Most of the Death Eaters that died have kids at Hogwarts. There were a few still alive, and Remus ported them to St. Mungo's, Sirius said, turning his head sideways so that he wasn't talking to the table. But all of you are all right, right? The teen asked again, just to make sure. Yeah, we're good, was the mumbled answer from both men, before they started softly snoring. Shouldn't we make them go to bed? Harry asked Andy, worried that they might wake up with a crick in their necks. They'll be fine for a little while. Let's finish our tea, and if they have roused by then, we'll float them upstairs, she said, looking fondly at the two marauders. If you say so, Harry said, picking up his cup and grabbing a pastry. His eyes not quite leaving the two men. Just then Moody flew in, he took one look at the sleeping men, snorted, said later. Then he stomped upstairs. I guess we should leave the rest until morning, Andy said with a sigh, then finished off her tea, nodded to Harry and levitated Remus up the stairs. Good night, Harry, she said as she left the room. Night, Andy, he answered, eating the rest of his pastry, and then doing the same for Sirius. After tucking his brother into bed, he went to bed himself. He was just glad it was over. It was, wasn't it? HP. Tonks made it back to the castle before Dumbledore. She quickly made to the library, where Hermione was waiting for her. Quickly, take these, the bushy-haired witch said, shoving a pile of books into Harry's arms. She then grabbed his elbow and started out of the room. Thank you, Madam Pants, we got what we were looking for, she whispered quietly to the librarian as they passed the checkout desk. Be sure you bring my books back unharmed, Pants said with a bit of heat. Don't I always? Hermione said with a huff. 5 years she'd been coming here, and no matter how gently she treated the books, this vile woman reacted the same. It was almost a ritual, for her to keep her temper. She had lost it a few times on the woman. She, of course, was banned from the library for a week, until she protested to a teacher, usually Flitwick, and they reinstated her privileges. Come on, Hermione, let's get out of here. I'm beat with all the reading you made me do, Harry said in his typical fashion. Oh, all right, Hermione said, sweeping up the checked-out books and all but stomping out of the library. As the two were making their way up the stairs to Gryffindor Tower, they were stopped by the headmaster. Harry, my boy, after tomorrow's breakfast hour, I would like to see you in my office, the old man said, looking over his glasses in a knowing manner. Have I done something wrong? Harry asked, looking lost and confused. I mean, I've been in the library with Hermione all night, he added, pointing to his best friend. Yes, we were studying Dada since we don't have a teacher at the moment, Hermione added, lifting the books for Dumbledore to see. They were, as noted, Dada books. Ah, the tenacious of the youth. Good show, to you both, and 10 points to Gryffindor for taking the initiative, the old man said, carefully looking at the titles. Nevertheless, in my office after breakfast. I find I like sugar quills this month, Albus added, turning around to leave the area. He had a bit to think about. He was sure the two were lying, but they had rudimentary occlumency shields, the like of which he had never come across outside of a werewolf. Fine, Harry huffed, and then stomped up the stairs, Hermione in his wake. When they got to the common room, they both fell into chairs next to the fireplace. Well? Ron asked, picking up one of the books, noting the title and then dropping it back on the table. He already had that one. As far as I know, it's over, Tonks said, with a huge grin. Really? Came the cautious question from 3 teens, who were all leaning forward to hear what was to be said. Yes, she confirmed. Then she too leaned forward. Ginny, Ron, Hermione, and Neville were almost touching heads as they all met in the center. I heard the whole thing. Sirius was invisible, and while Riddle and Dumbledore were being witty, he took a shot and bam, one dead Dark Lord, she said, leaning back with a smile. Thank Merlin, Ginny sighed. Neville nodded in agreement. So, why does the headmaster want to see you, if you weren't there? Hermione asked, picking up a book and skimming the pages. She was trying to look normal. Like I said, he didn't see who did what, so he automatically assumed it was me, Harry stated, shrugging a shoulder. Well, let's hope our alibi worked, Hermione said, closing the book and standing. I'm headed to bed. It's been a nerve-wracking night. Good night, all. Night, came the acknowledgements of the rest of the group. I'm B2, Tonks said, going up to the 5th-year boys' dorm. She closed the curtains and waited until they all went to sleep. She hadn't done much, but like Hermione said, it was nerve-wracking to wait for news. Once all the boys were out, she snuck to the head girl's room. It took all of 5 seconds for her to be in the land of Morpheus. HP. The next morning, at Grimewald Place, everyone was in much better spirits. They were eating a typical English breakfast, when Tonks flew in. She tripped as usual, but that didn't stop her from laughing. "Nymphatora, what is so funny?" her mother asked, waving her wand and cleaning up the juice the young woman had knocked over with practiced ease. "I just left Dumbledore's office, let's just say he is not happy with me," Tonks said with a grin, sitting next to Remus and filling up her plate. "Caught you out, did he?" Moody asked, waving his wand over his food. After all this time, no one took offense that he did so. "Sorta, I mean, I did let him know who I was." "After about an hour of him accusing me of killing Riddle," she said, with a self-satisfied smirk. "You let him go on for an hour?" Harry exclaimed, thinking of all the times he folded within minutes of being in the old man's company. "Trust me, he's got nothing on Moody here," she answered with a snort. "So, what, you told him, and he booked you out?" Sirius asked, putting his beans on his toast, making Andy sniff at his non-pure blood behavior. "Actually, I had to run for it," she confessed sheepishly. "Why?" was Harry's question. "That old bastard tried to use legilimency on me. He wanted to know what I know about where you are," Tonks said, folding her arms at the affront. "Not that it would do him any good." "This place is still hidden," Sirius said, smugly. "He hasn't been able to find it since I booted him out ages ago." "I know, and I know it's protected, but it made me so mad at his casual use of legilimency," Tonks huffed. "So, when I say I had to run, it was because I was so angry that I almost got into a duel. I had to hightail it out of there before I could get myself into something. I knew I couldn't win," she finished with finality. "Have we heard from Amelia yet?" Ted asked, speaking for the first time. "No, and I don't expect to until she's finished questioning Snape," Moody said, eating the last of his eggs. "Oh, well, I guess we'll just have to wait," Harry said, drinking the rest of his orange juice. He hated waiting. "Don't worry, Harry, I'm sure news will come soon," Sirius said, knowing that Amelia wanted it all in order as soon as possible. "Sure, I get that," Harry said, picking up a scone and lathering it with cream. "I just hate waiting," he added. "I'll head to the ministry," Moody said, standing to do just that. "I'll flew as soon as I know anything," he finished, then stomped to the flue. "Thanks, Moody," the teen said, stuffing the rest of his breakfast in his mouth. HP. An hour later, Moody and Bones came through the flue. Amelia made it to the table first. "Well, you'll be happy to know that Snape is going to be going away for quite some time," she said, as she reached across the table, and grabbed a cup of tea. It had been a long night and she wanted fortification. "Really?" Harry said, looking in her direction. "Why?" "Well," the head of the DMLE said, "I can't really tell you everything. It's still an open investigation, but what I can tell you is that he has not been completely honest with everybody for the last 10 years. While, what Dumbledore said was true, Snape was a spy, he was a double spy." She took a deep sip of her tea and sighed in satisfaction. "Oh," the teen said, a confused look on his face. "I always knew it," Sirius said, "that slimy bastard was always self-centered. If there's one thing we learned, going to school with that man, is that he will always look out for himself." "I guess," Harry said, thinking about what he truly knew of Snape. All he really knew that the potions master had once been friends with his mother. He knew that they had gotten into a fight, and that they had separated. He didn't know if they had ever made up after that, but it was doubtful. He knew that his professor and his father, and friends, didn't get along well. Above all, he knew that Snape was a bastard towards him and his friends. Not much good could be said of the man. Wait, didn't he try to warn us? Bill asked from his place by the fire. Yes, Bones answered with a nod. I didn't say he was completely evil or anything, but even good men break the law. She shrugged, like it was just the way it was. Oh, was a collective answer. Don't think too hard on it, Harry. You'll just give yourself a headache, Remus added as he moved into the room. So, is that it? Does that mean it's all over? Tonks asked, sitting next to Remus. Let's see, Sirius said, lifting a finger. 1. The Dark Dick is dead for good, all his little trinkets with him. 2. I'm free. 3. Harry is free. 4. Snape it in jail. 5. All the Death Eaters are dead or in jail. 6. Dumbledore is muzzled. He had lifted a finger for each point. And then, he thought hard for a few minutes. And then added, what else is important? Nothing that I can think of, Harry said, with a big smile. I think that covers all the important stuff, Remus said, giving Tonks a knowing grin. Now that it was over, they could explore the feelings they were having. It's all neat and tidy on my end. Umbitch dead. Fudge, like Dumbledore is muzzled. All the bad guys we know about are, like Sirius said, dead or in jail, Amelia said, finishing her tea. Thank Merlin, Harry said, heaving a huge sigh and then smiling bright enough for everyone to feel his happiness. Yes, thank Merlin, his brother said, getting up and pulling Harry out of his chair, where he proceeded to hug the stuffing out of him. It's done, Andy said, hugging her husband. Hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe.